Chapter 388. Inside the main hall of the Aikido tribe. The youth ACI was carried and placed on a thick tigerskin felt, his malicious gaze fixed on the row of people kneeling below. This old servant failed to protect his master. Please punish me, young master. Ahan knelt on one knee in front of the youth with his head lowered. Father. ACI hurriedly got up, but he was somewhat weak. What are you doing? Are you all dead? Why aren't you helping my father up? I've already said that no matter what, you're the father who raised me. There's no need to be so courteous. Ahan stood up, and a touched glimmer flashed through his eyes. He nodded and said, ACI, I've already examined your body. I've already asked the doctor to check your body, and there's nothing wrong with you. Although you were poisoned, when you left earlier, Master had already planted a poison-repelling fruit in your body, which can protect you from the corrosion of hundreds of poisons. However, that girl is vicious, and the poison she used on you is unusual. Even if you have a poison-repelling fruit in your body that can neutralize a lot of the poison, there's still a small amount of residual poison that can't be completely eliminated in a short period of time. Ahan sternly said, during this period of time, don't run out again. Stay in the tribe and properly recuperate from your injuries and completely remove the poison. ACI nodded. A tall and sturdy man suddenly stood up and cupped his hands in a low, muffled voice. Young master. This subordinate requests permission to bring a group of people to infiltrate Shuang City overnight. Even if we can't touch a single finger of the people in the city, this subordinate and the others can secretly eliminate that audacious girl. To repay young master for the humiliation you suffered on the city wall today. ACI abruptly straightened his body and glowered at the sturdy man. He tightly clenched his back teeth and angrily said, don't you dare touch a single strand of her hair. What did I do wrong? Was written all over the sturdy man's dumbfounded face. This subordinate devoted himself to eliminating an enemy for young master, so why did he provoke young master's anger? It's best if you don't meddle in this young master's affairs. ACI flew into a rage out of humiliation and threw a cup at them. Scram, scram, scram. All of you, scram. Ahan hastily signaled the two maids on the side with his eyes and hastily called for everyone to withdraw. Two maidservants stepped forward, trembling with fear. They knelt beside Assie's bed and said softly, young master, we will help you change your bandages. ACI coldly stared at the two maids and waved his hand for them to come forward. There were countless wounds of various sizes on Yasa's body. The bone fracture in his chest had yet to heal, and the various external wounds needed to be regularly changed and reapplied with ointment. One of the maidservants held the ointment in her hand, while the other gently helped him untie the cloth that was wrapped around his wound, dipped it in the ointment, and applied it to his wound. When the ice-cold ointment was applied to his forehead, Assie's eyes suddenly opened wide and emitted a cold light. He abruptly reached out and firmly grasped the maidservant's hand. The maidservant was flustered and blushed. She stole a glance at Yasi and sweetly whispered, young master. Woman, this young master will definitely conquer you. ACI glared at the maidservant with an ominous glint in his eyes. He pushed her onto the bed and viciously tore at her clothes. The other maidservant holding the ointment crawled back a few steps with a red face. She lowered her head and didn't dare to take another look. Young master, ah! This servant can do it herself. There's no need to trouble young master. The maidservant shyly looked at Assie's handsome face. Just as she was about to undress herself, ACI kicked her to the ground. Chapter 389. The maidservant fell to the ground with a thump and frantically gathered her tattered clothes. She hurriedly crawled back 2 steps and knelt on the ground, not daring to raise her head as her shoulders trembled. Your status is lowly and despicable. Ugly. Slut. Simply impudent. You dare to climb onto this young master's bed. You want to seduce this young master's pleasure. Simply indulging in fantasy. ACI strode off the bed with his hands on his hips like an angry lion as he angrily shouted outside, where are the Warhawk guards? Young master. Outside the door, Several armored guards rushed in and stared covetously at the woman who was lying limp on the ground and trembling all over. "Drag her out of here. Behead her in public." ACI roared. "No. Young master. No, don't. Young master. It's not that this maidservant is bold. Just now, young master, it was you who did this maidservant." "No, young master. This maidservant really didn't climb onto the bed on purpose. Young master, please investigate thoroughly. Young master, please investigate thoroughly." The maidservant trembled all over as two guards grabbed her by the arms and dragged her along the ground. Her legs kept kicking the ground as she screamed. More than half of the tribe was alarmed. The men and women all came out of their tents and looked in surprise at the young maidservant who was dragged out of the young master's tent. Her clothes were messy and tattered, and a few strips of cloth fell loosely on her body. It was very difficult to cover her snow-white skin. The women gathered together and curled their lips in mockery as they coldly looked at the pitiful woman being escorted to be executed. What an idiot, daring to seduce young master. She deserves to die. Isn't that so? Everyone knows that young master is notoriously picky and hard to serve. She actually deluded herself into thinking of flying to the top. Simply laughable. The moment the head fell, the woman's screams and cries also disappeared. ACI stood in the tent with his hands on his hips, his cold gaze falling on the other maidservant who was kneeling on the ground with her head bowed. She was trembling and didn't dare to say a word. "What's your name?" Guing. ACI coldly stared at the maidservant named Guing. "You also think that this young master is cruel, heartless, and unreasonable?" Guing hurriedly shook her head, but her trembling shoulders had already revealed the deep fear in her heart. "What are you waiting for? Come here and continue applying medicine for me." ACI retracted his cold gaze and turned around to sit on the edge of the bed. Guing hurriedly crawled a few steps forward. Without looking sideways, she stretched out her hand to apply the ointment. "Women. The next time we meet, this young master will definitely conquer you." "Definitely." Assie's wolfish eyes narrowed slightly as he lowered his head to look at the maidservant who was applying ointment on his chest. That extremely aggressive gaze made Guying's heart tremble slightly. She steadied her wrist with all her might and continued to apply medicine to the youth without losing her patience. "My Joe's section break, I've long heard that Shishia Valley's scenery is extremely beautiful. Now that I've seen it today, it truly lives up to its reputation." Before Murong Sun could finish speaking, she saw that female ghost faction disciple who brushed past them reach out at lightning speed to grab her youngest disciple's face. However, her fingers were suffused with a faint black glow, evidently dipped in poison. How could her youngest disciple's face be fine after this grab? She was simply too audacious. Murong Sun was about to explode. The ghost faction female disciple's sudden grab didn't cause the little stoic to panic in the slightest. She extended her palm even faster than the ghost faction female disciple and circulated some mystic energy around her palm to block the ghost faction female disciple's grab. Chapter 390. Little Junior Sister. Everyone cried out in surprise because they could see that this female disciple's cultivation was not low. At the very least, it was not below their holy water sect disciples. They heard that the ghost faction had a set of crooked cultivation methods that allowed their cultivation speed to be many times faster than normal mystic cultivators. This ghost faction female disciple's fingers were unable to penetrate the mystic energy defense on the back of the little girl's hand and only left a shallow white mark on her left hand. Arbor lowered his head to look at the white mark on his hand. He raised his head with an icy gaze and stared at the ghost faction female disciple as if he was looking at a corpse. The next moment, the ghost faction female disciple's body flew up and was kicked far away by Mo Lien. She coughed out a mouthful of blood and collapsed on the ground with a dispirited expression. Mo Lien took Arbor's small hand and examined it carefully. Her fingers lightly caressed that shallow white mark. The ghost faction female disciple was a tough nut to crack. She didn't make a sound or cry out in pain, but she couldn't get up from the ground for a long time after being kicked by Prince Imo. The Ghost Faction female disciple's eyes peeked out from her long bangs. At this moment, she was staring resentfully at Arbor, who was beside Imo Lien. To be precise, her gaze was glued to Crown Prince Lien's hand that was holding the little girl's hand. "What are you doing?" Another Ghost Faction disciple hastily ran up and tried to pull the female disciple up from the ground. His eyes, which were wrapped in a gray headscarf, stared vigilantly at the Holy Water Sect group. "Who are you? Making a big fuss here. Are you an idiot?" Princess Mi retorted without a second word. "You were clearly the ones who made the first move, all right? What do you mean by what are we doing? What can we do? Isn't that so? There's something wrong with your head." Chang Yushi also cursed. The Ghost Faction disciple's gloomy eyes looked straight at Princess Mi before sweeping over everyone. He felt that he and his junior sister had no chance of winning against so many people, so he resentfully planned to support his junior sister and leave. Who knew that the little stoic would say coldly, "Did I say you could leave?" The male disciple who was supporting the Ghost Faction female disciple suddenly froze. He stiffened his neck and turned his head around. His malicious eyes locked onto the young lady. "What do you want? My junior sister has already been reduced to this state because of you. Are you still not willing to let her go? She only has herself to blame. It has nothing to do with anyone." The little stoic shouted coldly and grabbed the feral with a swish. "You want to leave so easily after injuring me? Do you think I eat vegetarian and chant Buddhist scriptures all day long and assist the common people? Me? My junior sister has already suffered." Before the male Ghost Faction disciple could finish his sentence, he immediately sensed the stoic-faced little girl in front of him brandishing a terrifying mystic energy towards him and his junior sister. Boom! The nearby white jade corridor trembled, and jade fragments fell from the corridor. The little stoic leaped up and arrived in front of the Ghost Faction disciple with a whoosh. The mystic energy in her entire body surged, and a feral fell from the air. A line of fire shot out from the feral. This Xian weapon could feel its young master's anger and had already displayed its current peak state. Fuck! Wei Nanfeng screamed savagery in his heart, but he chuckled as he watched this commotion. Speechless, really speechless. Why did he provoke the little stoic without rhyme or reason? He had finally seen through the little stoic. She was usually easy to deal with, but once you crossed her bottom line, she would absolutely exterminate you directly. Chapter 391. There's no way she's going to waste words and reconcile with you. This little fellow clearly wants to kill you. Junior sister. The Ghost Faction male disciple's fury burst forth. His fist was imbued with mystic energy, and just as he was about to attack the little girl, he felt as if his fist was blocked by something, and was directly pulled backwards by a force. His arm uncontrollably rose backwards, and no matter how much strength he used, he couldn't swing it in front of the girl. Immediately, he inwardly cursed. There was an expert secretly protecting the girl and restraining him. The Ghost Faction male disciple raised his eyes and gazed at the motionless Prince Imo from afar. He only felt that the other youth's gaze was ice-cold and harsh, and his expression was solemn, as if he could completely dismember him into 10,000 pieces in the next second. Since he couldn't win, he could only dodge. The Ghost Faction male disciple protected his junior sister and dodged to the side of the corridor. However, he saw that line of fire follow them like a shadow, as if it was a gangrene attached to the bone. With a whoosh, it scuttled in front of the two people. Junior sister, please stay your hand. A Xixia Valley disciple anxiously shouted, that's Ghost Faction disciple senior brother Pengzhang and senior sister Choan. During the preparation period, it's best that you don't come into conflict, so as to avoid affecting the competition later. Bang! The Ghost Faction male disciple Pengzhang completely didn't know what was going on. The little girl actually appeared behind the two people in an instant. He clearly already hid to the other side of the corridor. How could this be? The feral swung down and directly smashed onto his junior sister's back, causing her to stagger forward a few steps and spit out another mouthful of blood. Arbor wasn't willing to give up. A cold glint flashed through his eyes, and with a whoosh, he once again flew in front of the ghost faction female disciple Choan. He looked down at the girl with a cold gaze and raised the ferrule in his hand high up again. For this attack, she gathered all the mystic energy in her body, and even mobilized the mystic energy in her branch meridians. She wants her to die. Now. Immediately. Stop. After a furious shout, an elderly man in his 50s, whose hair was standing on end like needles, suddenly flew over and blocked in front of the ghost faction's female disciple, Choan. He flew up and aimed a palm at Xiao Mu's chest. "How dare you, old man!" Morong Sun angrily shouted and arrived next to her disciple with a whoosh. A vigorous mystic energy circled around her disciple and collided with the incoming palm. After a reverberating hum, the elder was sent flying by Morong Sun. He barely landed on the ground before retreating several dozen steps. He clutched his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. "Junior sister!" Peng Zhang, the male disciple of Ghost Gate, cried out. In the blink of an eye, while Morong Sun was taking care of the elderly man, Arbor's ferrule, which had gathered all the mystic energy around him, had already descended and struck the ghost faction girl's head. Boom! Everyone felt that there was a reverberating sound in their ears. In an instant, they felt that everything around them had quieted down. The Hellgate girl fell heavily to the ground, blood dripping from the corner of her mouth. A defensive artifact in her hand suddenly rolled out from between her fingers, smashing into the ground and breaking into pieces. "Junior sister! Junior sister!" Peng Zhang's voice trembled as he called out a few times in fear. Cough cough, cough cough. Blood continuously spewed out of the ghost faction girl's mouth, and there were fragments of her internal organs mixed in the blood. It was truly a ghastly sight. Xixia Valley's disciples were already stupefied. They stood there stupidly and blankly stared at the little girl who was hovering in midair with cold and expressionless eyes. Chapter 392. She's actually not dead yet. Her life is quite tenacious. Arbor snorted, and a mystic guiding talisman matrix abruptly floated around him. A mystic guiding talisman matrix could gather all the mystic energy in the valley's surroundings to the greatest extent and continuously replenish it into one's body. This was truly wondrous in battle. However, this mystic guiding talisman matrix made from intermediate-level yellow talismans could not last for a long time, only 15 minutes. Right now, an endless stream of mystic energy was currently replenishing the mystic energy emptiness caused by Arbor's attack just now. Seeing that the little fellow's body was once again surrounded by mystic energy and his robes were fluttering, everyone stared with their mouths agape and tongue-tied. The two Xixia Valley disciples wished for nothing more than to faint immediately. Oh my heavens! Where did this ruthless little devil come from? She used a defensive barrier to block half of that attack, but now she thinks she's not completely dead yet and wants to attack again, right? The Xixia Valley disciples were already cursing the two ghost faction disciples to the bone in their minds. If it weren't for that female ghost faction disciple suddenly attacking someone else, how could there be so much quarreling? This seriously made the Xixia Valley disciples both angry and depressed. Since this happened in their valley, even if Master did not blame them, they still failed in their duties after all. They failed to satisfy the guests and even started fighting. Suddenly, stop! A dull middle-aged man's voice abruptly rang out. The two Xixia Valley chief disciples nearly cried tears of joy. Master! Stop again! Why was it so annoying? So long-winded? Arbor narrowed his eyes. His mystic energy had already reached a critical juncture, and the ferrule in his hand emitted a jet-black light again, ready to strike after accumulating power. Let's see if you can still die this time. Let's see if you still have a defensive barrier to block it. Peak Master Morong. This little miss, please show mercy. A person who hurried over abruptly moved to Morong Sun and Arbor's side and cupped his fists in salute. This humble one is Xixia Valley's Valley Master, Luo Jinyang. Greetings to the three peak masters. Valley Master Luo hastily saluted Morong Sun and the others with a faint smile on his refined face. May I ask everyone to stop for this Valley Master's sake? What's going on? At this moment, the leader of the ghoul faction this time, Elder Gui Bubu, rushed over with 30 disciples. Seeing Cho-un lying on the ground in such a miserable state, Ghost Surf immediately roared, "Who did this?" Although he was shouting angrily, his furious eyes were firmly nailed onto the little stoic's face. It was obvious that this young girl suspended in midair with a black mystic weapon in her hand was the main culprit. "You're blind!" The little stoic uttered coldly, a sharp, murderous intent concealed in her eyes. Ghost Surd was furious. He pointed at Arbor. "You little brat, you're too bold. Don't point your finger at my disciple. Just what is it? Go up and ask your disciple yourself." Morong Sun was furious. "Peak Master Morong, Elder Gui. Please calm down, please calm down." As if putting out a fire, Shishia Valley's Valley Master hastily appeased the two's fury and said with vigor, "Gentlemen, let's talk things out, let's talk things out. Let's figure out what happened first." "Yo! I didn't expect it to be so lively here. What is the ghoul faction planning to do by mobilizing all of their members? Do they want to start the competition in advance?" A faint chuckle was heard from the corridor in the distance. They saw a youth wearing a purple robe and a jade belt walking along the white jade corridor with a grin. Chapter 393. The youth looked to be about 17 years old. His long hair fell loosely to his waist, and his fair face and peach blossom eyes sparkled with light. The corners of his eyes were slightly upturned, and his boundless romantic charm overflowed. His gaze could clearly steal a person's breath. "Eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother, take care." A daybreak sect disciple shielded his head with an umbrella. "Eldest senior brother, it's already August, and the weather is starting to heat up. I'll fan you more, eldest senior brother." Another person was eagerly waving a fan for him. The youth rolled up his sleeves, and there was a careless smile on his thin lips as he occasionally looked up. Arbor happened to look back when she heard the sound, and she directly met the youth's smiling eyes. Both of them were startled. "Little girl." The youth's eyes brightened, and he suddenly shouted. Arbor blinked and looked at the youth who was excitedly running toward her. For a moment, she seemed to remember how the youth wanted to trick her several years ago but was ruthlessly tricked by her instead. The stoic face was still that stoic face, completely overlapping with the memory he couldn't wipe away from the bottom of his heart. Duanyu beamed with joy, and the little gloominess that had lingered in his heart these past few days was instantly swept away when he saw this little stoic. He was well aware that with the little fellow's outlandish talent, she would definitely participate in this 3 sects and 5 factions competition. Thus, he instigated Sect Master Liang Wanshan to come to Shishia Valley early from the start so that he could see this heartless little stoic as soon as possible. Who would have expected that God's plans would always exceed man's? He waited here and there until he was about to grow moldy, but this little fellow was nowhere to be seen. Today's meeting had really surprised him. He was caught off guard and saw her. Truly surprised and delighted, Duanyu quickened his steps toward the little stoic. He didn't even glance at the ghost faction's female disciple, Cho-un, who was lying on the ground and foaming at the mouth. His beautiful peach blossom eyes rippled as he said with a chuckle, "Little stoic, what are you doing? Let's go. It's rare for us to meet, so I'll show you around Shishia Valley. I've been here for several days already, so let me tell you. Don't worry about it." The crown prince slowly walked over and glanced at Duanyu with his phoenix eyes. "I will bring Jojo around Shishia Valley." "You rascal, where do you want to go?" When Duanyu turned around, he pointed at Mo Lien as if he had seen the plague and exclaimed in shock, You. Why are you here? Preposterous. Why was this person always following the little stoic around? Humph, you don't need to worry about where I am." Mo Lien grumpily slapped Duanyu's finger away. Duanyu raised his finger again. You. Duan Yu quickly bounced to the little girl's side. Stoic face, I'm telling you, you're still young right now. You mustn't be abducted by some strange big brother. Some people look like humans, but their hearts are actually very dark and scary. Murong Sun glared at the back of Duan Yu's head. Why did she feel like this youth was like a strange big brother? What nonsense are you spouting? Peak Master Murong is here, don't you see her? Mo Lien timely stabbed Duan Yu with a soft knife. Only then did Duan Yu see Murong Sun's ladle-like face. He quickly wiped away his mischievous smile and solemnly walked up to greet her. Greetings to Peak Master Murong. Disciple Duan Yu, Daybreak Sect's chief disciple. Chapter 394. While Duan Yu met up with the little girl and ran to exchange pleasantries with Murong Sun, Ghost Surd had been standing on the side with a dark expression for a long time. Now that he saw that no one was paying attention to him, how could he swallow his pride? He turned his head and shouted at a Ghost Faction disciple in a muffled voice, "What are you still standing there for? Don't you find it embarrassing? Bring Choan back. Let's go." Halt. Did I say you can leave? Arbor retracted his mystic energy and shouted coldly. Ghost Surd's face was flushed red from anger, and he turned to glare at Arbor. His eyes were so dark that it looked like black water was about to drip out. Little girl, don't go overboard in everything. So what if I go overboard? Arbor's expressionless and sarcastic attitude completely infuriated Ghost Surd. Does the Holy Water sect want to start a war with our Ghost Faction right now? What a load of nonsense. Arbor shouted angrily. No one is allowed to meddle in my personal grudge with her. Get out of the way. You're in the way. You're hindering me from dealing with people. Everyone silently glanced at the little stoic before sympathetically looking at Ghost Surd, who was rebuked. Those who had been rebuked by little junior sister before were very clear that once little junior sister set her mind on dealing with someone, she would not give up just because of a few words of dissuasion from others. Perhaps, the more they dissuaded her, the more unlucky she would be. You! This was the first time the Ghost Faction elder was angered to the point of vomiting blood by a junior. His face turned dark red, and his lips trembled as he repeatedly shouted, "Great, great! What an arrogant and despotic Holy Water sect disciple! Everyone, what exactly is going on here?" Shixia Valley's Valley Master could only stand up and mediate for everyone present. Do you understand the truth? The little stoic suddenly turned her small face and icily faced that Valley Master. The Valley Master was taken aback by the question and shook his head in embarrassment. Since you don't understand the situation, why did you suddenly jump out and meddle in other people's business to be the peacemaker? The little fellow continued to ask expressionlessly, is it that in your eyes, I should be a person without a temper because I'm young? Because someone directly tried to disfigure me, so I have to swallow my anger and not retaliate? The Valley Master was rebuked until he was speechless, so he could only rub his nose and repeatedly shook his head. Young lady, not to mention your terrifying battle prowess, with that poisonous mouth of yours, who would dare to bully you? Then move aside. It's a personal grudge between me and her, so let's just settle it between the two of us. Why are you talking about sects? The little girl turned her head with a cold expression and shouted at the Ghost Clan girl who was lying on the ground and pretending to be dead, "Get up. Coward. Don't play dead on the ground." Ghost Surd only felt that his sect's reputation had been completely destroyed. He angrily interrupted, "You. Little girl, don't be unreasonable to be unforgiving. Today, I won't let you off." What? Cloud people words. No wonder people don't want to befriend you people. Her icy voice instantly suppressed Surd's curses, and the surrounding people were dead silent. Duan Yu inexplicably shrunk his neck. He inexplicably felt very blessed when he recalled the scene when the little girl dissed him back then. Now it appeared that the little girl had indeed been merciful when she dissed him back then. Looks were still useful. Surd Ghost pursed his lips, feeling both vexed and angry. He also bore a grudge against the Ghost Faction disciple, Choan, who was lying motionlessly on the ground. Chapter 395. If it weren't for this person's brainless actions, how could the sect be humiliated like this? He really wanted to dump this burden and quit, letting this brainless female disciple Cho-eun resolve this problem herself. But as the sect elder leading the team, how could he be willing to make his sect disciple back down in front of others? Otherwise, wouldn't he lose even more face? Consort face was gloomy as he stared at the little stoic. You said Cho-eun attacked you. She has no enmity with you, so why would she attack you? Ask her. She's the one who attacked, not me. Your question is rather funny. Arbor's cold gaze swept over him. Cho-eun, speak. Why did you attack? You don't need to be afraid with the elders here. Did someone threaten you to do something that would harm the sect, so you attacked in anger? Consort's words elicited a light chuckle. Elder Ghost, why don't you set up a stall in a tea house and be a storyteller? Yang Shirong mocked. Cho-eun lay on the ground without moving, as if she had already merged with the earth. Consort was so angry that he wished for nothing more than to lift her up and slap her twice. He had already paved the way for her, but this idiot actually didn't climb down the pole. This made his old face flush red, and he couldn't back down no matter what. Just take it that my ghost faction disciple is in the wrong. But you've punished her and hit her before. Cho-eun is currently heavily injured, so you should have vented your anger. I haven't, Arbor replied coldly. The surrounding melon-eating crowd naturally had speechless expressions. Duan Yu's mouth twitched, but Mo Lien chuckled, his darling's angry expression is so adorable. Look at how sincere her words are, choking Elder Ghost to death with one sentence. At this time, more and more people gathered. The Heavenly Tao sect, Daybreak sect, and Purple Firmament faction disciples who had already arrived at Shixia Valley and were waiting for the competition all came to watch the show after hearing the news. When they heard that the Ghost faction's elder was attacked by a Holy Water sect disciple, they all wanted to come and see what the situation was. It was one thing for the Purple Firmament faction disciples to have never seen the little stoic. Situ-yi, Shang-kun, and the others who were once familiar with the little stoic couldn't help but twitch their mouths when they saw the little stoic. They were still wondering who was insulting them, but it turned out to be their stoic little junior sister whom they hadn't seen for many years. How did the people of the Hellgate provoke this little fiend? What else do you want? You're not injured at all. Why are you holding on to my sect's disciples and not letting them go? Elder Ghost's face and ears were red. His head was probably about to be filled with blood. The little stoic extended her small, fair hand in front of the Ghost faction's elder. Everyone's gazes fell on her little paw. It was white and tender, small and delicate, and a little chubby. It was a very pretty little jade hand. Do you see this white mark? She left it behind. She injured me. The little stoic said resolutely. The surrounding crowd fell to the ground in unison. Their faces all revealed expressions of wanting to laugh but holding back their laughter. Oh my God, this little stoic was so shocking. That white mark on her little jade hand was so faint that it could be ignored. Attacking me for no reason and injuring me, she deserves to die, Arbor said coldly. How pitiful was her ruined body in her previous life. No one knew better than her how much she valued her body and skin. She didn't wish for it to receive even the slightest bit of injury again. Chapter 396. The reddish-purple face of the Ghoul sect elder began to change again, gradually becoming darker and darker. Cho-eun! Get up! Consort angrily roared and kicked Cho-eun, the female disciple sprawled on the ground. Elder! Junior sister is heavily injured and can't stand up by herself. I'll help her up. Peng Zhang hastily walked up and used his strength to help Cho-eun up from the ground. Cho-eun lowered her head and didn't make a sound. Her breathing was weak as she leaned against Peng Zhang. Only one eye peeked out from under her bangs, emitting a faint light. Take her away. The Ghost faction elder angrily shouted, I'd like to see who dares to block our path. Bite him. Arbor pointed at the condescending ghost faction elder. A snow-white and sturdy snow leopard pounced out from behind the crowd without any explanation. It pounced forward and caught the ghost faction elder off guard, pinning him to the ground. Its sharp teeth suddenly bit the elder's left hand, causing him to scream in pain as his eyes bulged out of their sockets. Ah! This is little junior sister's mystic beast. A Daybreak sect disciple exclaimed in shock. Little junior sister has such a valiant mystic beast, so what's the point of competing? She'll lose for sure. Even Elder Ghost can't withstand a bite from this mystic beast. Are you blind? Can't you see that little junior sister's cultivation is only level 8? That's right. But how can a level 8 mystic cultivator summon a mystic beast? Everyone was talking at once, so how could they care about the ghost faction elder's wretched screams? Ah! Elder Ghost circulated a wave of mystic energy and mercilessly smashed the snow leopard's head. Unexpectedly, the snow leopard understood human nature and tilted its head to dodge. At the same time, it raised its sharp claws and slapped him across the face. Elder Ghost's face was bruised on the spot, and 3 glaring claw marks appeared on his face. Shishia Valley's Valley Master was dumbfounded as he watched the increasingly intense farce in front of him. He opened his mouth and looked at Murong Sun pleadingly. Peak Master, please be magnanimous. If the ghost faction elder suffers any injuries in Shishia Valley, I can't bear the responsibility either. Murong Sun glanced at him. Valley Master, it's just a personal grudge. Why do you have to interfere and cause trouble for yourself? Shishia Valley's Valley Master couldn't help but smile bitterly. He knew that he couldn't persuade him anymore. What do you want? Finally, the female disciple of the ghost faction, Choan, opened her mouth. Her voice was so hoarse that it was as if she had been run over by a wheel. It was quite strenuous for her to speak. Just now, you used your left hand to scratch my face. Now, leave your left hand behind. Xiaomu said expressionlessly as she threw a short dagger in front of the female disciple with a clang. The snow leopard stopped, but its eyes bulged as it stared at the ghost sect elder who was wailing while holding his hands. Ghost Surd hurriedly crawled back a few steps, hurriedly escaping from the leopard's mouth. He looked back with lingering fear. The female disciple of the ghoul faction was trembling so much that her entire body was swaying. She was afraid, but more than that, she was naturally angry. Her anger was already uncontrollable and was about to overflow from her chest. If you don't leave your left hand behind, then die. The little stoic flared up as soon as she said it and was about to turn hostile and merciless on the spot. However, Peng Zhang was even more decisive than the female disciple, Choan. When he saw that the little stoic was about to dash up and kill again, he immediately picked up the dagger on the ground and slashed it down. There was a flash of light. Ah! Choan let out a wretched scream. Her face paled, and her eyes closed. She immediately fainted in the crook of Peng Zhang's arm. Peng Zhang's eyes, which were hidden under the gray headscarf, were about to practically spill out venom. Chapter 397. You're asking to be disgraced. Xiao Mu coldly tossed out this sentence and trotted over to her master. Let's go. Ghost Surd used his hand to cover the 3 red scratches on his old face from the snow leopard and indignantly led a group of ghost faction disciples past the Holy Water sect disciples in a single file. Every ghost faction disciple fiercely glared at the Holy Water sect disciples with a fiendish gaze. Our rest time was delayed by some meaningless people. Let's also go. Mo Lien stepped forward and held the little fellow's hand with a smile. Am I easy to bully? Our dear Xiao Mu suddenly looked up and asked softly. Before Mo Lien could answer, Wei Nanfeng, Princess Mi, the Holy Water sect disciples, as well as the Daybreak sect, Heavenly Tao sect, and Violet Firmament faction disciples watching from the side, all madly shook their heads in unison. They completely disagreed with the little stoic's words. You're easy to bully, huh? You're easy to bully. This was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Then, why did that person suddenly want to scratch my face? The little stoic couldn't figure it out. I keep feeling like her gaze on me had a deeper meaning. It was like she was staring at an enemy from the start. Right, Jojo, Duan Yu interjected. I'm telling you, the onlooker sees more clearly than the person involved. I saw it clearly just now, that woman's eyes were staring straight at him. This must be a debt he incurred. He implicated you. Don't let him get so close to you. You have to know how to protect yourself, Jojo. Mo Lien raised her phoenix eyes and coldly turned to Duan Yu. However, although she was glaring at Duan Yu, Mo Lien started rapidly sorting out suspicious candidates in her mind. After sifting through all of them, a hint of inspiration flashed through her mind. What debt? Arbor was perplexed. Shut your mouth. Before Duan Yu could make a fuss, Mo Lien had already stopped him coldly. Releasing Jojo's hand, Mo Lien looked at Duan Yu with a grin. Come with me. What do you want? Duan Yu suddenly covered his chest with both hands, and his watery peach blossom eyes abruptly widened. He revealed a horrified yet beautiful face and made an action that left people speechless. Let me tell you. Threats and threats were useless. I will not yield. Jojo, I'm telling you, don't look at how this guy looks alright and is only slightly inferior to me, but he definitely owes a buttload of favors. Ow! Before Duan Yu could finish his sentence, a line of fire suddenly struck the corner of his mouth. What the fuck? You dare to kill me? Duan Yu threw out a handful of shooting stars with tinkling sounds. They were divided into 3 paths, with 18 shooting stars in each path. Each shooting star was the size of a date pit, and they were aimed at the crown prince's head, hands, and feet. Mo Lien withdrew the flames on her body and sent a shockwave that deflected all of Duan Yu's concealed weapons. As a result, the spectators were unlucky. Accompanied by cries like, Mother, Mother, Heavens, and so on, Duan Yu's 18 shooting stars scattered. After being deflected by Mo Lien, they separately flew towards the people of Daybreak Sect, Heavenly Dao Sect, and Purple Firmament faction. The spectators were simply dumbfounded. Who would get caught in the crossfire like you guys? Perhaps the 2 of them were fine after the fight, but the spectators were dying from watching the show. They couldn't understand what was going on at all. This drama was really one scene after another. It was so brilliant that it was an eye-opener. Chapter 398. The little stoic looked up at the 2 people fighting further and further away. She furrowed her brows and shook her head. She sighed as if muttering to herself, men all like to fight so much. Everyone. Murong Sun was amused. She pulled her little girl over and nodded with a smile. That's why Miss is the best. Miss is so understanding and considerate, unlike those brats, each worse than the last. The brats in the surrounding circle. Murong Sun then turned to Shixia Valley's Valley Master Luo Jinyang and said with a smile, Valley Master Luo, if there's nothing else, then we'll go rest first. Everyone, please. Valley Master Luo amiably smiled at Peak Master Murong and gestured for one of the 2 Shixia Valley chief disciples to continue leading the Holy Water Sect's people to their residences. For this competition, Shixia Valley specially set up several unique courtyards with beautiful environments for each sect's people to live in. The distance between each courtyard was not too far. In general, the contestants' residences were all arranged in the southern region of Shixia Valley. The residences of the 3 sects were arranged together. The courtyards on the left and right of Holy Water Sect were respectively for Daybreak Sect and Heavenly Dao Sect. Not long after everyone entered the courtyard, Heavenly Dao Sect Sect Master, Sita Min, and Daybreak Sect Sect Master, Liang Wanshan, both came to visit Murong Sun and Yang Shirong. The 3 Peak Masters and 2 Sect Masters went to the main hall to chat, while the little stoic and her senior sisters went to the side rooms to pack up. There were a limited number of rooms in this small courtyard. After they were arranged, the disciples could only share 2 people to a room, which was barely enough. The remaining 2 rooms were allocated by the Peak Masters themselves. When Doya heard that she had to live with someone else, she immediately pounced over and hugged the little stoic's arm, shouting with all her might, little junior sister, let's live together. Chang Yushi pursed her lips. I still want to live with little junior sister, but you beat me to it. Doya playfully stuck out her tongue at Chang Yushi before dragging the little stoic's left arm towards a small side room. Little junior sister, do you want to sleep inside or outside? The carriage stopped at the picturesque entrance to Shishia Valley. A gray-haired, hunchbacked, limping elderly man in his 60s walked out of the carriage. He covered his mouth with a handkerchief and coughed heavily. Lord Liu. The retainer hurriedly reached out to support his withered left hand. He bowed his head respectfully and said, My lord, you've overworked yourself these past few days. Please take care of yourself. Luigi waved his hand at his retainer and didn't say anything. Instead, he continued to walk towards Shishia Valley's entrance with his stooped body. Who is this guest? A female disciple guarding the entrance of Shishia Valley was slightly taken aback, and then she very politely saluted the elder. Cough, cough, cough. Luigi took out an invitation from his sleeve and handed it over. The female disciple cupped her fists and bowed, So you're a guest elder of the Ghost Sect. Greetings, Your Honor. Your Ghost Sect group has already moved into the 4 Southern Courtyard, I'll get someone to lead you there. Cough, cough, cough. Many thanks. The old man replied in a hoarse voice. The retainer supported Luigi, and the two unhurriedly followed behind the Shishia Valley disciple who was leading the way. After walking for a distance in the boundless sea of flowers, the retainer lowered his voice and asked, Sir, we came here this time just to see that Miss Chow. Actually, sir, as long as you secretly send someone. The hunchbacked elderly man coughed several times and raised his head to glance coldly at the retainer. The retainer immediately stopped speaking and lowered his head. Chapter 399. Luigi walked very slowly with a hunched back. He glanced at the Shishia Valley disciple leading the way in the distance and coldly said, Did you forget that the group of people you sent out didn't even enter Shizhou City's Chow family's courtyard? The retainer hung his head even lower in shame. It's better to wait and see. Don't be too ostentatious. The elderly man coughed several times in succession before grabbing the retainer's arm and having him speed up to catch up with the Shishia Valley disciple in front. When the two people passed by the second southern courtyard, they stopped and glanced inside the courtyard. The Shishia Valley disciple hastily said, The first to third courtyards are where the 3 sects are located. The Holy Water sect's disciples live in the second southern courtyard. Cough, cough, cough. Luigi nodded while coughing while clutching his handkerchief. His pensive gaze was fixed on the entrance to the Holy Water sect's courtyard. He stared for a while before saying, I heard that there's a spring on the Holy Water sect's snowy peak that releases water all day long. The water is clear and free of impurities, so it's named the Holy Water Spring. Cough, cough, cough. It can even increase the mystic energy in the disciples' bodies, so it's named the Holy Water Sect. The Shishia Valley disciple nodded with a smile. This disciple has also heard that the Holy Water Sect has more than 800 disciples. I heard that they were all selected to enter after passing the Holy Waters test. Luigi nodded with a smile. Suddenly, he saw the courtyard's door open. A delicate and pretty girl in a red short-sleeved shirt walked out while dragging another little girl in plain clothes with a face as cold as snow. The red-clothed girl couldn't help but be startled when she saw the people standing outside the door. She subconsciously took the little girl's hand and glanced at the Shishia Valley disciple with vigilant and suspicious eyes. What are you standing here for? Little junior sister, please don't misunderstand. This is the Ghost Faction's guest elder. I'll bring them to the Ghost Faction's courtyard. The Shishia Valley disciple nodded at the two with a kind smile. Oh. Doya nodded and turned to say to Arbor, Little junior sister, let's go. When I came in, I saw a pavilion with a pretty good view. I'll bring you up there to take a look. Arbor nodded and abruptly turned her head. A trace of severity shot out of her eyes and shot directly at the elderly retainer who was peeping at her. The attendant was shocked. Cold sweat was about to drip down from his forehead. "You're up to no good." Arbor was very sensitive to people's auras. Ever since her rebirth, she could tell at a glance who was friendly to her and who was hostile to her. Luigi's heart skipped a beat, and he hastily tugged at his retainer. He turned around with a stifled cough and gave the little stoic an unsightly smile. "Little miss, cough cough cough, you're thinking too much. We've never met before, so why would I, cough cough, harbor ill intentions towards you? Hellgate?" The little girl raised her voice slightly. The heart of the Xixia Valley disciple who had already experienced her prowess jumped slightly, and he hurriedly went up to salute her. He tried to smooth things over with a smile. "Little junior sister, please don't be angry. This old mister is only a guest elder of the ghost faction. He doesn't know anything about what happened earlier. Be careful." Arbor glanced coldly at the elderly man and his retainer. "I'll be the first to send people who harbor ill intentions towards me to hell." The retainer's forehead was drenched in cold sweat. He secretly exchanged glances with the elderly man and watched the little stoic leave with a myriad of emotions. As expected, she was a tough bone to chew. No wonder that person above valued her so much. She really wasn't easy to deal with. Chapter 400. Luigi and Elder Ghost were brought to the Ghost faction's courtyard. When Elder Ghost heard that Luigi had come, he immediately led all the disciples out to welcome them. He respectfully led Luigi and Elder Ghost into a seat in the hall. "This old man heard that you guys, cough, 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 got into a conflict with a girl from the Holy Water sect and even lost face?" Ghost Sir hastily bowed and begged for forgiveness. "Sir Lu, why we were wrong. We disgraced the estate lord." "Humph." Luigi waved his hand and said disdainfully, "With your lowly cultivation, don't say you're the estate lord's subordinates after you leave." Ghost Sir didn't dare to speak. He and the other Ghost faction disciples hung their heads and stiffly listened to Luigi's reprimand. "Your Ghost faction investigated the matter this old man instructed for 3 years, but there was no news at all. Sir Lu, that Holy Water sect is located far above the snowy peaks and has a single environment, so it's difficult to sneak in. 2 years ago, we also sent 2 female disciples to sneak in, but they didn't pass that so-called holy water test." Ghost Sir had a bitter expression when he mentioned this matter. Luigi sneered. "You can't even handle such a small matter, yet you still dare to call yourself the estate lord's subordinates? All of you, stop, cough, cough, cough." "Sir." Ghost Sir and all the other disciples simultaneously knelt on the ground with a plop. "Sir, please quell your anger and give us more time. This time, no matter what method we use, we will find out about the holy water spring." Cough, 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 cough. The elder snorted coldly and kept coughing violently into his handkerchief. "Sir, is that holy water spring really effective on Sir's illness? You don't need to concern yourselves with this matter." Luigi impatiently waved his hand at them again. "This old man has 30 years of experience in tempering pills. Cough, cough, cough. As long as I have the holy water spring, I think it's only a matter of time before I can refine a mystic breakthrough pill that can allow me to break through to level 15 and enter the ranks of supreme experts. At that time, as long as he broke through to become a level 15 great mystic cultivator and his body entered another profound realm, he would naturally be very different from his current state. Perhaps all the pain from his previous illnesses would be swept away at that time." Suddenly, a figure pounced out from the crowd of disciples, quickly crawled a few steps, and knelt in front of Luigi. He kowtowed several times and said, "Elder, please bestow a level 12 mystic breakthrough pill. Choan wants to break through to level 12 in one go. You're just a cripple with a broken arm and a blind eye. What reason do you have to get an incomparably precious level 12 Xian breakthrough pill from this old man? I am willing to give up my life." "Junior sister." Peng Zhang raised his head and shouted angrily. "Your lowly life is of no use to this old man." Luigi sneered and looked at the woman with eyes full of mockery. Choan kowtowed with all her might. Her head smashed onto the ground with loud bangs. Choan is willing to be Elder's vessel. I'm willing to offer all the profound energy in my body to you. I only ask that you give me a level 12 Xian breakthrough pill. Let me break through to level 12 in one go. Afterwards, I can personally kill my enemy in this competition. Luigi laughed hoarsely. Suddenly, he bent down and forcefully pinched the female disciple's chin, raising her face high up. Choan trembled all over. Your face was slowly mended by me needle by needle back then. For this, your father paid a huge price. Chapter 401. Luigi flung her face away and snorted. Would this old man be interested in a fake face? Elder. Choan crawled a few steps forward and hugged Luigi's left leg with all her might. Her cries were more mournful than the last, and her eyes were filled with intense hope. I beg Elder to fulfill my wish. I beg Elder to fulfill my wish. Elder. Luigi took out a wooden box from his bosom and threw it at the woman's face. Since you're so unbearably thirsty, this old man will fulfill your wish. When this old man returns to my room in a while, I want to see you stripped and washed clean. In addition, this old man isn't interested in a withered flower. One of Choan's pupils abruptly contracted, and she tightly gripped the wooden box with both hands. Her fingernails had long embedded themselves in the box's crevices, pricking a trace of blood. Junior sister. Peng Zhang was genuinely concerned about his junior sister. He had watched her cultivate so arduously and assiduously, fearlessly going to various adventure holy lands to temper her physique and abilities. But it was precisely this hard-working her that had her left hand cut off by him, despite the pain. Now, in order to beg for a mystic breakthrough pill, she was willing to degrade herself and betray herself, willingly serving that ugly elder who was even older than her grandfather. Ah! Peng Zhang burst out with a loud yell, and then he was forcefully held down by the two disciples around him. Junior sister, you can't do this. Junior sister, junior sister. The two disciples firmly covered Peng Zhang's mouth with their hands, preventing him from making any more sounds. Peng Zhang struggled on the ground, and his pair of eyes peeked out from under the gray cloth, bursting with heartache and anger. Choan turned her head and coldly glanced at Peng Zhang with one eye. Then, she tightly gripped the wooden box in her hand and abruptly turned her face away, no longer looking at him. Senior brother, although you are very concerned about me, this is far from enough. What I need is a powerful person to protect me by my side, so that I will never suffer any harm. You! Too weak and simply don't deserve to stand by my side. That night, Choan walked step by step into Elder Lu's room. She blew out the lamp and lay on the cold bed, her whole body cold. She stared straight at the black silk canopy above her head, a teardrop falling from the corner of her eye. Her father, her family, and him. Since she couldn't rely on anyone, she could only work hard and fight for herself. She wanted to become stronger. She wanted to become a great level 12 mystic cultivator. She wanted to trample that bitch under her feet in the competition fair and square. She wanted that heartless man to know that even if it was someone he treasured the most in his heart, once they entered the arena, life and death would be up to fate. Not everything could be controlled by him. This time, she wanted him to be powerless to reverse the situation. She just didn't know if she would still be able to see that cold and indifferent him at that time. My Joe's section break. Arbor slept in the middle of the night, only to hear a commotion outside the courtyard, and the lights were lit up little by little. Doya turned over and placed a calf on her lap. She smacked her lips and continued to sleep, showing no signs of waking up. Arbor glanced at her speechlessly. Why were they all sleeping so well? The commotion outside had already turned the sky upside down. She simply put on her clothes and got out of bed. Just as she pulled open the door, she saw two figures running in front of her, one after the other. One tried to pull her left hand, while the other tried to pull her right hand. In the end, the youth who pulled her right hand had his hand slapped away by the youth who was pulling her left hand and questioned him in passing, "What are you doing?" Chapter 402. Duan Yu glared at him. You're the only one allowed to hold hands. Of course. Mo Lien grumpily glanced at Duan Yu and directly pulled Arbor to the main courtyard. I wonder what's going on outside, Mo Lien whispered. I saw the 3 peak masters leave their courtyards. They can't even sleep peacefully, a senior sister who woke up grumpily said as she rubbed her eyes. Soon, they saw Yang Shirong walk in with a dark face. She waved her hand at the holy water sect disciples. Go sleep. Ignore them. All the disciples looked at each other. How could they sleep with such a loud ruckus outside? They heard a male disciple from Daybreak sect and not the Heavenly Tao sect say in a low voice, you people from Coitus sect say you lost your pet as soon as you arrive and even insist on searching their courtyards from house to house. What kind of logic is this? How can you be so tyrannical and overbearing? Can't you wait until daybreak? Oh my! This handsome brother, why are you so fierce? This servant is so scared. Do you want to touch and see that this servant's heart is still thumping non-stop because of you? A gentle and charming voice instantly made all the Holy Water sect disciples' hair stand on end when they heard it. Fuck, those vixens from Coitus sect came. They were as disgusting as always and had to mumble a few syllables when they spoke. Scram! Someone from the 2 sects shouted angrily, probably because that female disciple from Coitus sect who threw herself into the man's arms was loathed. Ah, why are you so fierce? If you don't like this servant, then this servant won't lean on you. That woman's voice was mellow and contained a hint of seductiveness as she spoke delicately. Suddenly, she raised her voice slightly, and with a coquettish voice that gave people goosebumps, she shrieked, Aya, it's Big Brother Situ. I didn't even see you. Big Brother Situ, why aren't you calling Mei here? Duan Yu shuddered all over when he heard this. Why were the women of Coitus faction each more disgusting than the last? He had to hurry and look at his little stoic more often to wash his eyes and make himself feel better. Yang Shirong's expression turned even uglier. She waved her hand at the disciples and said, don't worry about it. Go back to your rooms. The little stoic silently turned around, wanting to listen to Second Antmaster and return to her room to be a very obedient child. However, the speed at which they stirred up trouble was completely out of your expectations. With a thud, the door to the second southern court, where the Holy Water sect temporarily resided, was kicked to the ground. When Xiaomu turned around, she saw Situ Yi, that handsome youth with sword-like eyebrows, bright eyes, and graceful features, hastily fleeing behind her and Mo Lien as if he was being chased by a ghost. Aya, Brother Situ, don't run. You're making me so nervous. The little stoic got a clear look at that girl called Mei. Her figure was rather impressive under her bright yellow dress. At first glance, she really did have a surging something, and her slender waist couldn't be held in one hand. She was a peerless beauty, but she had a gaudy temperament. Situ Yi hid behind the little stoic and Mo Lien. He shook his body and fiercely rubbed the fine goosebumps that protruded from his arms. He really couldn't take it anymore. Duan Yu was dumbfounded. He didn't expect things to take such a sudden turn for the worse. He was just about to find a place to hide, but it was already too late. Mei was originally pouncing at Situ Yi, but when she suddenly saw Duan Yu and Mo Lien after pouncing to the side, she was instantly stunned and screamed with a handkerchief stuffed in her mouth. Chapter 403. Duan Yu jolted in fright and simply subconsciously shrunk behind the little stoic. Mo Lien, on the other hand, wasn't that cowardly. She instinctively leaned closer to the little stoic and tightly grasped the little girl's small hand. Just as Mei was about to pounce forward, the stoic face raised her leg and kicked Mei's stomach under everyone's twitching mouths, sending her flying. Well done. Duan Yu and our dear Situ Yi both gave the little stoic a thumbs up in their minds. Heavens, they only felt that if their limbs touched that woman from Coitus faction, they would feel very dirty and uncomfortable. The little stoic blocked evil spirits and blocked wind and moon. The stoic and icy face was simply an invincible basin of cold water that could drench people from head to toe and chill them to the core. Why are you making a fuss in the middle of the night? Can't you let people rest? Wei Nanfeng sleepily walked in, followed by Bailey Shi and Princess Mi Chi Mei, struggled to crawl up from the ground, her pretty face already flushed red from anger. She turned around and stormed to Arbor, shouting angrily, "Who are you? You stink to death. Stay away from me." The little stoic's face was frigid, and she directly reached out to sweep away the fragrant breeze drifting to her nose. Duan Yu and Situ Yi nodded repeatedly. As expected, the little stoic could do what others couldn't. She directly rebuked Chi Mei's face with her words. "You!" Seeing that Chi Mei was about to get into trouble, Xixia Valley's Valley Master, who had hurried over, shouted angrily as if putting out a fire, "Stop! Miss Chi, didn't this Valley Master already send people to escort you back to your courtyard? Why are you still causing trouble in the second southern court? You came late enough today and shouldn't have disturbed other people's rest." Chi Mei stomped her feet and her small face was covered in tears. "My little pet swam away. It has a very strong poison. I was worried about everyone and was afraid that it would hurt others. That's why I ordered a group of senior and junior sisters to search the courtyards. Unexpectedly, I was misunderstood by everyone." Woo-woo. The little stoic's hair stood on end when she heard this. She glared at Chi Mei and angrily asked, "What little pet? Did it even need to swim? Me? My purple flower little snake." Chi Mei sobbed. "Its venom is very strong. If I'm not careful and get bitten, I won't be able to save that person." Everyone suddenly felt a trace of panic in their hearts. They turned back and forth to check their surroundings. Seeing that there was no one around, they let out a sigh of relief. Suddenly, a peal of laughter was heard from inside the room, and Murong Sun strutted out in a brocade gown. She held a thin rod in her hand and held a small snake that was slightly charred. She smiled at the person behind Chi Mei and said, "Old witch, long time no see. I didn't expect to be given a ration as soon as I arrived. It wasn't easy to get some food these days. Thank you, old witch. It's quite crispy and delicious when roasted. Do you want a bite too?" Everyone was dumbfounded. Peak Master Murong had actually roasted and eaten an extremely poisonous snake from the Joyous sect. He was truly a powerful person. An old woman's face with drooping wrinkles slowly appeared in front of everyone. Only then did everyone clearly see that the Joyous sect's faction master, Granny Witch, had also come. They heard that when Granny Witch was young, her figure was bewitching and voluptuous, and her beauty was out of the ordinary. Countless sect disciples prostrated themselves before her, but she used them all as vessels to absorb them one by one. Chapter 404. Later on, Granny Witch seemed to have offended someone, causing her appearance to be completely disfigured, resulting in her current ghastly appearance. However, no one knew what kind of grudge she had with Murong Sun for her to arrange for her disciple to cause such a farce as soon as she arrived at Xixia Valley. Murong Sun ate that purple-flowered snake with relish, but Granny Witch's wrinkled old face had already scrunched up into a ball. It could be seen that the old woman was very angry at this moment. She turned to her disciple, Chi Mei, and fiercely shouted, "Don't you find it embarrassing? Come back." Feeling wronged, Chi Mei walked behind Granny Witch with small, quick steps. Her beautiful eyes were filled with shyness and timidity as she swept her gaze over the outstanding youths. "Murong Sun, long time no see." When Granny Witch opened her mouth, her voice was quite crisp, like a nightingale leaving the valley. The contrast between her voice and her appearance caused people to shudder instead. "TSK. It has been quite a while." Murong Sun casually tossed the roasted snake she finished eating to the ground and cheerfully examined Granny Witch's sagging and wrinkled old face. "Old Witch, your face seems to be a bit more wrinkled than it was a few years ago." Everyone could see that Granny Witch's face twitched slightly. Presumably, her mood was not as calm as she appeared on the surface. Perhaps she already wanted to butcher Peak Master Morong and chew on her flesh in her heart. Today, it is this old woman's disciple who has disturbed everyone, Granny Witch said aloofly. This old woman apologizes to everyone here. Let's go. Setting aside Chi Mei that oddball, the beautiful woman in plain white clothes with only a small beaded flower in her hair behind the old woman was quite different from the red and green senior sisters around her. Her expression was serene, and her eyes were downcast. Occasionally, she would raise her head and look at everyone with a trace of benevolence. This was truly a little white flower that grew out of the mud without being stained. Everyone silently said this in their minds and looked at Miss Chi Hua, sympathetically. What a pity. A proper girl from a decent family had to follow a group of Coitus Valley witches in and out. Sigh, it truly made one's heart ache. Wait. Morong Sun's voice immediately made Shixia Valley's Valley Master, Luo Jinyang, jump in fright. He hastily walked up and said with an apologetic smile, Peak Master Morong, look, it's quite late now. Can we talk about our business tomorrow? Morong Sun glared at this good-natured Valley Master and waved her hand. I don't have any other intentions. Since the misunderstanding has been resolved, you can leave if you want. However, I don't know which idiot kicked down my front door, so it has to be fixed immediately. Otherwise, no one will be able to sleep. Fix it. All the Holy Water Sect disciples angrily rebuked in unison. Shixia Valley's Valley Master, this kind old man, hurriedly nodded his head repeatedly. All right. I will immediately send someone to repair this courtyard door. I guarantee that it will be repaired immediately. Morong Sun glanced at this miserable Valley Master and harumphed. She quietly grumbled, you're such a busybody. She even wanted the old witch to personally fix the door for her. This good-natured Valley Master was like a firefighter all day long. Wherever there was a fire, he would pour water on it. The Valley Master thought to himself, I also don't want to. Who knew that you 3 sects and 5 factions would attack me the moment you see me, and you'd go even further each time. Granny Witch led the group of Coitus sect disciples away resentfully. She was very displeased that she was unable to take Morong Sun and the others down a notch today. Chapter 405. Before parting, that Miss Chi Mei's gaze kept roving over each of the youths. She was reluctant to part with them and found it difficult to tear her gaze away from Mo Lien. The little stoic suddenly raised her arm. While everyone's mouths twitched, a crow-gold arrow pierced through the air and shot straight for Chi Mei's shifty eyes. When Chi Mei saw the arrow flying towards her, her soft waist immediately leaned backwards. With a sound, the black gold arrow flew past her face at a high speed. What are you doing? Chi Mei had just straightened her body and was about to curse when she heard another terrifying sound coming from the back of her head. Her slender waist was abruptly grabbed by Granny Witch, and her entire body floated a step to the left. She looked on helplessly as the black gold arrow that she had dodged turned around and shot towards her from the back of her head. If it weren't for Master saving her just now, her head would have been pierced by the crow-gold arrow, and her life would have been forfeit. When she thought of this, Chi Mei's entire body started trembling, and her venomous eyes looked at the expressionless arbor who was withdrawing his crow-gold arrow. You! Shixia Valley's Valley Master was simply speechless. He started to regret it. Why did he agree to the 3 sects and 5 factions back then and allow this lousy competition to be held in his valley? Woo, he was a good old man who couldn't refuse other people's requests. He was always smiling all day and was persuaded to nod with just a few words. If he could have stuck to his principles back then and not allowed them to hold this event in the valley, he could have avoided so much trouble from quarreling with each other. Woo. Little girl, you're so young, but your heart is so vicious. Granny Witch frowned and sneered. As expected of a disciple taught by Morong Sun, you're so vicious. Thank you for the compliment. Morong Sun tugged at her lips. Damn girl. How could Chi Mei tolerate this? She angrily pointed at Arbor and shouted, why are you so vicious? The little stoic glanced at her and dryly said, "Don't stare at me like that. I'll kill people. Everyone, dot. PFT. Wei Nanfeng really couldn't hold back his laughter. Duan Yu and Situ Yi, who were standing behind the little stoic, couldn't help but rub their foreheads. Little junior sister, aren't you thinking too much of yourself? She wasn't even looking at you. Chi Mei was so angry that her face turned red and green. She glared at her and shouted angrily, "Who's looking at you?" "You." The little stoic said matter-of-factly and stretched out two fingers to indicate the direction of their gazes. "You've been staring at me since just now. I don't like the look in your eyes. And your eyes are too ugly. You're drawing like a female ghost. It's better if you don't come out to scare people at night." Not to mention Wei Nanfeng, this idiot, who was unable to control himself from laughing. Everyone else present, including Bailey Shi, who was usually expressionless, couldn't help but twitch their eyebrows when they heard this. Mo Lien, who had been speechless all this while, suddenly lowered her head to look at the little fellow's serious expression. Well, this baby of his was very serious. She really felt that the joyous Union Valley disciple had been looking at her. For some reason, when everyone saw their little junior sister's serious stoic face, they couldn't help but roar with laughter. Morong Sun's mouth twitched, and she lightly coughed to remind the Holy Water sect disciples who wanted to join the crowd in roaring with laughter. Your little junior sister is still young, so don't laugh at her. Arbor was baffled and looked up at Mo Lien. Chapter 406. Although she lived to the age of 26 in her previous life, she had never experienced any love affairs. She had toiled for half her life, constantly striving and working hard her entire life. At the time, her mother passed away, and her younger brother was only 2 years old. Her father was instigated by her stepmother to bring their family to the Chow family's main residence in Guanlan City. In the beginning, they couldn't enter the Chow family at all and were arranged to live in a small, dilapidated courtyard outside the Chow family's main residence. It wasn't until Arbor was 16 years old that her family suffered the Chow family's disdain. She was called trash until she was 16 years old, and her situation only improved after she awakened her mystic meridians. At the time, everyone thought that since she was already over 15 years old, it was impossible for her to successfully awaken her mystic meridians in this lifetime. However, she held back her energy from beginning to end. After she was 16 years old, she suddenly awakened her mystic meridians on her own one day, causing quite a stir in the Chow family at the time. After all, her situation was considered rather special. After that, even though she successfully awakened her mystic meridians, she still didn't dare to relax. At the time, she thought that since she was stupid, she had to work even harder than others. Thus, she actively participated in all kinds of missions to earn living expenses and continuously train herself in battle. She wanted to improve herself like crazy. She had walked out of danger after mission and joined a very ordinary team. Their team wasn't like other teams, which were all made up of mystic cultivators and superhumans. They didn't even care about body cultivator teams. There were even normal people in Arbor's team. The team of nearly 20 people was made up of mystic cultivators, body cultivators, superhumans, and normal people. Every time they went on a mission, everyone would do their best to help each other and try their best to survive in a vile environment. It wasn't until the second year of the mission that she broke down and cried bitterly for the first time when she saw her younger sister Shaolin's tattered corpse in the wilderness that she cried bitterly. Even though she was called trash and good for nothing for so many years and received constant disdain from the main family, she never cried. But at that time, Shaolin's body was truly too tragic. She couldn't hold back her tears, and they rolled down her face. She only remembered kneeling beside Shaolin's tattered corpse and tightly gripping the doll she had given her back then, sobbing uncontrollably. Ever since Shaolin was sent away, she secretly ran to the wealthy Dou family and visited Shaolin a few times. She even gave her some food and a doll. The doll was embroidered for her by her mother when she was young. Later on, she gave it to Shaolin. In her previous life, until Xiao Lin's death, she didn't dare to tell Xiao Lin that she was her older sister. When they met again, she saw her sister's pitiful corpse. At that time, she had been piecing Xiao Lin's broken body together piece by piece as if she had gone crazy. She wanted to complete her body so that she could at least leave in one piece. But she couldn't even do that. Xiao Lin's body had been left in the forest for too long and had long been gnawed on by wild dogs. She fought madly with the wild dogs and killed them all. Then she held her poor sister and wept uncontrollably. Later on, she realized that just crying was useless. What could crying do? Other than being able to vent his emotions, there was nothing else he could do. 3 years later, his teammates were eliminated one by one in the harsh environment. In the end, only she and Fan Qiuhe were left. Fan Qiuhe. When Arbor recited this name in her heart, her snowy eyes instantly filled with dark clouds. Chapter 407. She thought she could forget, but reality proved that no matter how hard it was to recall the past, this name was still carved like a sharp blade, landing in the depths of her heart. Fan Qiuhe was a very gentle man. He was 8 years older than Arbor, and he always maintained the appearance of a smiling big brother. He was the eldest son of Guanlan City's Fan family. His birth was very noble, but he was easy to get along with. He was cultured and refined, a very good person. In the team, Fan Qiuhe had always been the leader. He had led everyone out of difficult situations many times, making everyone maintain a reverent attitude toward him. In her last life, Arbor was one of the few people that he had sincerely befriended. Friend. Friend. If the others could only be considered Arbor's teammates, then this one could definitely be considered a teammate and a good friend. After the two of them got to know each other better, Arbor was quite dependent on this good friend. His trust in her also deepened day by day, to the point that he was willing to give up his life for her. However, it was this kind of man who always had a gentle smile on his lips. This was the friend that she valued the most in her last life. When only the two of them were left, he gave her the most fatal blow. For 2 years, she had been locked up in the dark room that he had carefully prepared for her. She watched as this good friend of hers, whom she had trusted in the past, knocked on her body all day long, studying her inner world. This person had always said one sentence: "It's really strange, Arbor. Why is it that your cultivation is clearly much lower than mine, but your inner world is bigger than mine? Your mystic sense is really strange when compared to other people's. Can you seriously tell me why? I'm a person with an apparition of mystic sense. You can't lie to me. This is all thanks to the apparition of mystic sense. You have secrets on you, Arbor, don't you? Please tell me. I'll be very grateful." So funny. If she was a sensible person, she wouldn't have fallen into such a passive situation. She didn't know anything. Only a silly girl who didn't know anything would be deceived into such a situation. Jojo. She felt her body become light. She was actually picked up by that guy, Mo Lien, in front of everyone's eyes. She stared at him with her big, dark eyes, staring straight at him. "You're in a daze, my Jojo," Mo Lien frowned and said softly, "Your expression makes me uncomfortable." It was as if there were countless thoughts hidden within, and it was so heavy that it made one feel uncomfortable. "You must be tired after messing around for most of the night. Ciao ciao, let's go to sleep." Mo Lien simply picked up the little lady horizontally and turned around to stride towards her room. Everyone was speechless. Behind him, Murong Sun fumed with rage and hollered, "Damn brat, you're really pushing your luck more and more. What did that chicken claw girl mean?" Xiao Mu's puzzled voice rang out. Could it be that she wasn't looking at me? Everyone was speechless. She was just used to walking with her fingers curled up like an orchid, but you called it a chicken claw. How embarrassing. She's looking. She's looking at you. Mo Lien said with a smile. My Jojo is the best. That's right. Arbor nodded, thinking that the youth was very correct. She knew her taste was right. That gaze was clearly directed at her. That despicable woman actually dared to use such a disgusting gaze to stare at her. The arrow she shot at her just now was still too light. Chapter 408. The next morning, Myriad Faction's faction master, Fei Pengyi, also rushed over with his son, Fei Qing. Xixia Valley's valley master thought that the 3 sects and 5 factions had all arrived, so he gathered everyone to discuss and advance the competition. Everyone actually understood the valley master's feelings very well and sympathized with him. He really wanted to send them, this batch of plague gods, away as soon as possible. Hurry up and finish the competition and scram. Don't cause trouble in Xixia Valley. Who knew? I am Zhou Chao. 2 days ago, I received faction master's notice that our Myriad faction still needs to wait for Eldest Miss to join up. Eldest Miss and her group are estimated to arrive the day after tomorrow. A Myriad faction disciple in his early 20s spoke somewhat uneasily in front of so many people from the 3 sects and 4 factions. Ha, 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 ha. Granny Witch laughed crisply. Her wrinkled old face was full of disdain. Ning Guilai, this coward, procrastinates every time he does something. He wants to be a good person yet doesn't want to offend either side. How can there be such a good thing? Isn't that so? Myriad Faction's faction master, Fei Pengyi, was over 50 years old. He had a long, thin, and narrow horse-like face, and his small eyes were slightly narrowed as he sneered. If we had decided to have eldest Miss Ning participate in the competition from the start, there wouldn't have been so much trouble. Humph. Granny Witch snorted. Forget it, we don't mind waiting 2 more days. Thank you for your understanding, seniors. The Wanxiang sect disciple wiped his sweat and respectfully bowed to the group. Myriad Faction's faction master, Ning Guilai's second brother, Ning Guidong, sat in the Myriad Factions group, not daring to let out a fart. How would he dare to oppose Granny Witch and Fei Pengyi? His petty appearance was not as natural and unrestrained as that young disciple, Zhou Chao, and was very disdainful of him. We don't mind. It's only the 7th of August anyway, and there's still a long time before the scheduled 14th of August. It's fine as long as eldest Miss Ning arrives on time. Daybreak Sect's faction master, Liang Wanshan, said with a wave of his hand with a bright smile on his square face. This was Daybreak Sect's faction master, Liang Wanshan. It was the sect master that her father had always talked about. After her father was expelled from Daybreak Sect, he still held this sect master in high esteem. Looking at him now, Liang Wanshan could be considered a straightforward person. Qiao Zhongbang wasn't Liang Wanshan's disciple back then. His master was an elder in the sect. Arbor had once deliberately found time to ask about his father's past and had a chat with him. He learned that his father's master was called Wei Cheng and was a very cold-hearted person, which was why he mercilessly expelled his father from Daybreak Sect after his father's mystic veins were damaged. As for the person who framed Qiao Zhongbang, Arbor also knew his name. That person was called Mu Liangde, and he entered Daybreak Sect at the same time as her father. They were once best friends and lived in the same room, eating and living together. But it was precisely this fellow disciple and good friend of Qiao Zhongbang's, who he didn't guard against at all, who had actually secretly plotted against him. He put a slow-acting poison in his tea and fed it to Qiao Zhongbang every day and night. Over time, the poison accumulated in his body and completely destroyed his mystic veins. If it weren't for the sapling's leaves helping her father sense mystic energy anew and reconstruct his mystic veins, Qiao Zhongbang would have completely become a cripple in this lifetime and would never be able to recover his identity as a mystic cultivator. Xixia Valley's Valley Master Luo Jinyang's eyelids suddenly twitched when he saw Miss Qiao staring fixedly at Daybreak Sect's faction master Liang Wanshan. Chapter 409. Cough. Valley Master Luo hastily said, since no one has any objections, then let's wait for eldest Miss Ning for another 2 days. Once eldest Miss Ning arrives, the competition can be held in advance. The Omni-faction disciple, Zhou Chao, didn't respond, but Liang Wanshan continued, then let's wait until eldest Miss Ning arrives. At that time, eldest Miss Ning will be fatigued from the long journey, so she will certainly need to rest for 1 or 2 days. Valley Master, the competition isn't urgent. His words were indeed reasonable. The Omni-faction disciple, Zhou Chao, cupped his hands at Liang Wanshan and revealed an expression of endless gratitude. The Valley Master's eagerness to finish the competition as quickly as possible and immediately chase them out was evident. As long as one wasn't blind, they would be able to sense it. Xixia Valley's Valley Master, Luo Jinyang, laughed awkwardly and sighed unhappily in his heart. This group of plagues still had to stay here for a few more days. Hopefully, they wouldn't cause any more trouble for him during these few days. He kept feeling that he had rapidly aged in merely a few days, and many strands of white hair had sprouted. It was all because of the 3 sects and 5 factions' worries. Sect Master Liang, does your sect have a disciple named Mu Liangda? Arbor suddenly asked, her eyes still staring unblinkingly at Sect Master Liang Wanshan. Liang Wanshan had long discovered that this holy water sect girl had been staring at him. Yesterday, when he and the Heavenly Tao sect master, Sitimin, paid a visit to the 3 peak masters, he had noticed that this chilly little girl had been staring at him without blinking. Sect Master Liang was adept at handling matters and had already secretly ordered people to investigate. He found out that this little girl was the Holy Water sect's youngest disciple and also Peak Master Murong's most beloved last disciple. Normally, as long as no one provoked the little girl, she would speak very politely. Liang Wanshan smiled at Arbor and said with a nod, there is indeed a person named Mu Liangda. Is Miss acquainted with him? Liangda, please stand up. All the disciples were seated behind their own sect or clan master. The 3 sects and 5 factions basically had around 30 disciples in each group. Fortunately, Xixia Cloud Valley's conference hall was quite large and was packed to the brim. When Mu Liangda of the Daybreak sect heard the sect master's call, he respectfully stood up. Wearing the Daybreak sect's unique white robe, he was over 30 years old, but his face was fair and beardless. His appearance was handsome, and his posture was confident and at ease. The moment he stood up, he attracted the coquettish glances of the Coitus sect's female disciples. Mu Liangda smiled at the young lady. May I know who you are? Liangda doesn't seem to have seen you before. The little girl nodded and said seriously, it's good that you don't know me. In the first round of the competition, I challenge you. You just have to remember that I am someone who is about to beat you to death. Everyone was speechless. The corner of Xixia Valley's Valley Master's mouth kept twitching. He had just been silently praying in his heart that the 3 sects and 5 factions should not cause any trouble for the next 2 days, and now, trouble had come again. Mu Liangda did not get angry and actually smiled very confidently. He said humbly and courteously, since Miss wants to challenge me, then I can only accompany you. However, whether the first round of the competition is between you and me is still subject to discussion. When Arbor stood up, everyone's mouths involuntarily twitched. Arbor turned his small face and looked at Xixia Cloud Valley's Valley Master Luo Jinyang, who had turned his head away. Good person Valley Master, I want to challenge Mu Liangda in the first round. Is that all right? Chapter 410. The good person Valley Master really wanted to cry. Call this little girl savage, but look at her soft and squishy little thing, she was more fair and adorable than anyone else. Call her indecent. She was more serious and expressionless than anyone else. Every sentence she said sounded quite serious when separated, but it was extremely hilarious when strung together. She even said, I'm someone who's about to beat you to death. These words were truly hilarious. We still have to draw lots according to the order of the competition. This way, it's fairer for everyone. Xixia Valley's Valley Master gave the excuse he had thought of long ago. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the little girl's slender brows furrow into a knot. Xixia Valley's Valley Master was distressed, so he quickly smiled kindly at the little girl. However, little girl, don't be impatient. Even if you didn't draw Mu Liangda in the first round, it doesn't mean you won't draw him every time. Mu Liangda. What's going on? He felt like Xixia Valley's Valley Master spoke as if he was a prize. Draw or not draw? If you draw, you'll get the grand prize. If you don't be discouraged and continue to draw. Then will the results of the draw be announced? Will the name of the person who draws the number plate for Muliangda's match be announced? The little girl seemed to be especially reasonable today as she continued to interrogate good-naturedly. The Valley Master instantly felt that the little girl was giving him face, so he nodded cheerfully. That's right, that's right. All the names of the competitors will be announced one day in advance. I will have the Valley disciples prepare them then. Okay. Our dear Xiao Mu didn't say anything else and sat down obediently. Only the disciples of the 3 sects and 5 factions kept feeling some kind of energy faintly lingering above their heads. Something was wrong. There was something wrong with the little girl's style today. Shouldn't she immediately berate Muliangda? Why did they feel so strange when she suddenly asked the Valley Master if they would announce some sort of name list? However, Muliangda was oblivious to the impending calamity and smiled coolly. He lifted his white robe and sat down with a ramrod straight posture. When he sensed a gaze, he turned his head and met Duan Yu's eyes. Muliangda naturally did not dare to slight this sect master's eldest personal disciple. He nodded at Duan Yu with a smile, but he was very puzzled as to why the other party was shooting him a meaningful gaze. When the Valley Master saw that everyone had reached a preliminary agreement, his tense mood finally eased a little. He laughed and said to everyone, "Since we still have to wait for 2 more days, then everyone can do as you please during these 2 days. If you want to leave the valley for a walk, that's fine. If you want to cultivate in seclusion, you'll have to hurry." The meaning behind the Valley Master's words was, whether you scram or go into seclusion, in short, please don't cause trouble in Shixia Valley. Everyone pretended that they didn't understand what the Valley Master meant. They all nodded with a smile and followed the people from their respective sects back to their residences. For the next 2 days, the Valley Master felt very comforted. The people of the 3 sects and 5 factions all closed their doors and rested in their own courtyards. Every time Shixia Valley's disciples went to deliver food, they would always bring back news of peace and tranquility to the Valley Master, causing the Valley Master's nerves, which had been stretched taut for 2 days, to finally relax slightly. That night, Ning Bihuan finally arrived at Shixia Valley with a team of more than 20 people led by her. In view of everyone's excellent performance these days, the Valley Master planned to treat everyone to a small banquet out of his own pocket as a welcome dinner for everyone. When everyone arrived, Ning Bihuan's group was already there. Chapter 411. Eldest Miss Ning led her people and boldly sat at the main table in the center. The remaining Omni-faction disciples surrounded Ning Bihuan's table and also took up 2 or 3 tables. The small feast was set up next to the flowery pavilion in the valley. There were a total of 26 tables, and the dishes could be considered very sumptuous. Shixia Valley had always lived in seclusion, so there was quite a bit of grain stored in the valley. It was rare for them to be able to have a good meal, so the Holy Water sect disciples hurried over early, planning to occupy a good seat. In the end, they saw Ning Bihuan's corpse-like face staring gloomily at them. To be more precise, Ning Bihuan's stiff and cold corpse-like face was facing Mo Lian. Her serene eyes unwaveringly stared at the youth in front of her. She almost instantly recognized this youth as the person who had appeared in her younger sister's remnant life lamp. Her deep gaze stared straight at the youth, but she didn't receive the slightest response. The youth's gentle gaze landed on the little girl beside him the entire time, so how could he notice Ning Bihuan's gaze? The little girl had changed into a pink robe today. The little fellow, who always wore plain clothes, appeared even more pinkish and tender after changing into a small robe, as if she was carved from jade. Mo Lian didn't notice Ning Bihuan's overbearing gaze, but the little fellow caught it at once. At this time, Ning Bihuan's gaze had already shifted to the little girl. When Arbor clearly saw Ning Bihuan's appearance, she couldn't help but be taken aback. This girl seemed a bit familiar. Her face was oval, and her willowy eyebrows were slightly curved to her temples. She wore a cyan robe, and her entire person appeared to be in high spirits. Ning Bihuan saw her somewhat bewildered appearance and knew that she had already forgotten about her idiotic younger sister, Ning Bifan. It wasn't that she cared much about that idiot. She just didn't like people directly climbing over their Omni-faction's head to behave atrociously. She, the one surnamed Ning, wasn't that easy to talk to. Ning Bihuan curled her lips and looked straight at the little girl. Do you feel that my face is a bit familiar? Half a month ago, you killed someone in the adventurer base near the Great Swamp. She had the same face as me. That girl was my twin sister, Ning Bifan. Realization dawned on Arbor's face. He nodded at Ning Bihuan and said, I remember now. It's that woman who put her face in front of me and kept telling me to hit her. After I hit her, she asked me why I dared to hit her. She's such a strange person. The senior sisters of the Holy Water sect didn't understand the reason, but they could understand how hilarious it was when they heard the little fellow's explanation. Ning Bihuan naturally didn't know that such a thing had happened at the adventurer's base, but she had always understood the extent of her brainless younger sister's stupidity. She didn't doubt the young lady's words. Are you here to avenge your sister? Arbor looked at her and asked. Ning Bihuan sneered, do I look like such a bored person? If an idiot dies, then so be it. I'm here to challenge him. Ning Bihuan's finger pointed straight at the youth Mo Lien. A bellicose flame danced in her eyes. You're very strong. Youth. I want to challenge you. When the people from the Daybreak sect, the Heavenly Dao sect, and the other 4 factions came over, they just happened to see Ning Bihuan pointing at Mo Lien and issuing a challenge. Everyone couldn't help but fall silent. The competition hadn't started yet, but there were already people issuing challenges one after another. Young Master Mo isn't a member of our Holy Water sect. He only came to watch the competition. Chapter 412. Su Shanshan coldly rejected Ning Bihuan's challenge. Ning Bihuan, your opponent is us. Don't get the wrong opponent. Ning Bihuan pursed her lips noncommittally and stood up to look straight at Arbor. Alright then. After the competition ends, I hope to battle with young Master Mo and see who's better. Arbor was baffled. Miss Ning, why are you staring at me? Why are you staring at me when you want to challenge young Master Mo? Am I not young Master Mo? Ning Bihuan was also a bit gloomy. She originally didn't come to seek justice for her idiotic younger sister. From beginning to end, she was willing to participate in this competition with only one goal, to not let anyone bully her Omni-faction and tell anyone from the 3 sects and 5 factions that her Omni-faction couldn't be bullied. In addition, she wanted to challenge the white-clothed young master. She saw that powerful youth in the miniature of her younger sister's life lantern, and this youth practically ignited all the fighting blood in her body at that time. She wanted to fight. She was a person who lived for the sake of fighting. Hello, stoic-faced miss. Do you think I want to look at you while speaking? In reality, that young Master Mo of yours didn't even spare a glance at other people out of the corner of his eye from beginning to end. She only spoke to Arbor because she had no other choice. Mo Lien, someone wants to challenge you. The little girl tugged at his sleeve. I'm not free. Mo Lien held the little girl's small hand and followed the Holy Water sect group to take their seats. You'll definitely accept my challenge. Ning Bihuan stood up and stared darkly at Mo Lien. She threw down this sentence with a stern face, but the latter completely threw it to the back of her mind. Xixia Valley's Valley Master hurried over after hearing the news. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when he saw that the 3 sects and 5 factions were all present and were chatting softly, clinking cups, drinking wine, and eating. He had just received news that eldest Miss Ning had quarreled with the Holy Water sect disciples, so he thought that this group of young ladies would turn the entire banquet upside down again. Unexpectedly, the scene he saw was so harmonious. It truly surprised and delighted the Valley Master, and he almost wanted to shed a tear for himself. It truly wasn't easy to be a competent peacemaker. After 3 rounds of wine, everyone was 80% full. On a whim, Shisha Valley's Valley Master ordered someone to bring over the lot pot and said to everyone with a chuckle, "Seeing that everyone from the 3 sects and 5 factions has gathered, I might as well bring forward the competition. If eldest Miss Ning doesn't have any objections, how about we set the competition for the day after tomorrow?" Ning Bihuan waved her hand, a stiff smile hanging on her stiff little face. "We martial artists aren't that particular. The day after tomorrow is the day after tomorrow, it's up to you." Miss Ning is truly straightforward. Shisha Valley's Valley Master was overjoyed. "Dear ancestors, hurry up and finish the competition and scram." After the Valley Master signaled with his eyes, Shisha Valley's disciples hastily carried the 8 bamboo tubes to the disciples of the 3 sects and 5 factions. "There are 120 pairs of numbers here. If you draw the corresponding number, go to our disciples and register." The Valley Master explained with a smile, then let all the disciples of the 3 sects and 5 factions draw lots. In any case, it was all up to luck, so no one paid much attention to it. One by one, they reached into the lot pot and took out a lot. 2 Shisha Valley disciples sat on the side to register the lot and name. Our dear Chow Mu abruptly stood up and pattered over to Daybreak Sect's table. Duan Yu immediately turned around in excitement, and his peach blossom eyes blinked as he asked, "Jojo, you were looking for me?" Chapter 413. I'm not looking for you. Arbor shook her head and looked at Mu Liangda, who was sitting at the same table as Duan Yu. Mu Liangda stood up and smiled at the little girl in a self-righteous manner. He asked amiably, "Little miss, you're looking for me again?" Duan Yu pursed his lips at him. "Who's looking for you?" "The little girl is looking for you to beat you to death." "Michem, she's looking for you." Arbor nodded. "What's your number?" "This one is number 82. Mu Liangda looked at the number in his hand and smiled good-naturedly at Arbor. He wasn't afraid of this little girl. Even if the little fellow said she wanted to beat him to death on the day of the competition, he would only treat it as a joke. What a joke! This little girl even shamelessly boasted that she wanted to beat him to death in the first round of the competition, ha ha ha. It was hilarious just thinking about it. She really was a little girl spoiled rotten by her elders. It wasn't a good thing to go out and gain experience with such blind confidence. She would be killed by her own arrogance and stupidity. That's right, he just didn't believe that he, Mu Liangda, could be defeated by a little girl with his skills. Ha, don't joke around. He wasn't a simple mystic cultivator. Everyone in the sect knew of his abilities. Even his master, Wei Cheng, had to take his identity into consideration and flatter him a lot of times. "Jojo." Duan Yu pulled her aside and whispered to her, "This Mu Liangda is famous in the sect for being a smiling tiger. I heard that he has some connections with Guanlon City's talisman patrician family. He seems to be from a side branch of that family. He has many powerful talismans in his possession." As he spoke, he stuffed a small box of concealed weapons into her hand. "If you really fight him, don't let him throw talismans. Feed him a bunch of shooting stars first and beat him to death." "Talisman practitioner?" The little fellow was startled, but she took the box that Duan Yu stuffed into her hand and nodded repeatedly. "Number 82 was it?" She first ran back to her own table and browsed through all the senior sisters' hands. "Michem, there was no number 82. Then she ran to Situ Yi's table and had him check if anyone in the Heavenly Dao sect had that damn number 82. "Jojo, do you really want this number 82? Wei Nanfeng couldn't help but tease, "Then what if the person holding number 82 isn't willing to exchange with you? For example, if you picked a lot, your opponent would be stronger. Naturally, others wouldn't be willing to trade with you." Xiao Mu cast him a glance, and her small brows creased deeply again. "Troublesome. There's no 82. Situ Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he returned after asking around. Arbor was a little angry. He turned around and glanced at Bailey Shi, who was sitting in the Purple Firmament faction's seat. He frowned and thought for a while, then ran over on his own. "Do you have 82? The little fellow poked Bailey Shi's arm and stared at him. Bailey Shi glanced at her and did not refuse. However, when he went to ask his fellow disciples, there was a trace of helplessness in his eyes. His hard work paid off, and he finally got the answer from Bailey Shi. The holder of lot number 82 was a 15 or 16-year-old young girl from the Violet Firmament Guild. Her face was round like a delicate red apple. Miss Chow looked down at her lot number. "I'm number 53. Are you willing to exchange with me?" "Sure, it's not registered anyway." Yuan Jixin, the girl who picked up lot number 82, very straightforwardly handed over the lot number in her hand. In fact, the Valley Master had long seen everything. Cough, cough, this was clearly blatant cheating. Chapter 4:14. Why didn't anyone stop them? And so many shameless people even popped out to support them. Valley Master expressed that he was very stifled. Seeing them act so openly, he could only choose to be blind. "Thank you." The little girl thanked him politely, took the number from the other party, and handed her number 53 to the other party. Then she added, "If you can't beat that number 53, I'll help you beat him back later. I'll help you vent your anger." Yuan Jixin giggled. Number 53 took that number and glanced at it, silently speechless. Bailey Shi's mouth twitched helplessly. "Miss Chow, number 53 is standing next to you." "HM. What a coincidence." The little girl turned her head and saw the face of an ordinary passerby. Number 53 was also a Purple Firmament faction disciple, but he was considered one of the weaker ones among the many senior brothers and sisters. So when the little girl's gaze shot over, number 53 hurriedly raised his hands and said in exasperation, "Don't worry, little girl. I definitely can't beat senior sister Yuan Jixin. Once senior sister makes a move, it'll only be a matter of 2 or 3 moves, and I'll immediately roll off the stage." This joker. Everyone laughed and scolded. Yet the little fellow heaved a sigh of relief and returned to her table after bidding farewell to Bailey Shi and the others. Seeing her return, Mo Lien couldn't help but chuckle softly. The little fellow finally got her wish after busying herself for a round, but why was it so interesting? Mo Lien propped up his chin with one hand and turned his head to look at her with an uncontrollable smile. "If that girl with number 82 isn't willing to exchange with you, what do you plan to do?" Our dear Chow Mu was expressionless, but her 2 small brows furrowed again. "That Miss Yuan is pretty good. She's not a man, so I can only drop it." Everyone was a mystic cultivator, and Mo Lien and Arbor's conversation wasn't low. The youths at the nearby tables all heard it, and they couldn't help but widen their eyes when they heard this. What did she mean? So what if he was a man? Men were discriminated against, right? Wei Nanfeng chuckled as he squeezed over with a wine jug in his hand. "If number 82 is a man and he's unwilling to exchange with you, from your tone, you plan to beat him up overnight and directly snatch away the number?" Our dear Chow Mu nodded honestly. It couldn't be helped. She planned to do that from the start. However, number 82 was a girl, so it was better to be more refined. PFT Wei Nanfeng winked at Mo Lien and said meaningfully, "I feel that this little lady is even more mischievous than you. She needs to be taught." When Morong Sun heard this, she immediately shielded her. "What? You have an opinion? I teach my disciple too well." Wei Nanfeng hurriedly flattered, "Indeed, indeed. Peak Master Morong, this disciple has misspoken." "Humph." Morong Sun rolled her eyes at him and reached out to pick up food for her youngest disciple. "My dear disciple, you were busy the entire night and didn't eat much. Here, eat more. Your body is still growing." Peak tt eat Morong ti chow ti eat teas to eat teat, ti chow tt. After a short while, the small plates were piled up into a small hill. "Come, Jojo, eat more." Mo Lien placed the chopsticks in her hand and looked at her with a grin. "You'll only have the strength to beat people when you're full." Everyone. Young Master Mo's style was off. If Hui Feng was here, he would definitely chuckle and say, "Sorry, His Highness has always treated the little girl like this." Chapter 4:15. 2 days later. Everyone had recuperated until they were abnormally full of energy. One team after another set out to the northern part of Xixia Valley, which was an extremely spacious field. The forest here wasn't as lush, so the Valley Master had long made preparations. He ordered people to set up a large stage and also set up many seats for everyone. The 10 or so silk seats in the front row were naturally prepared for the sect masters and elders of the various sections. The disciples each sat on a row of small square stools in the back row. Some extremely bored people even prepared their own tea and snacks, intending to eat while watching the show. The Valley Master set up a gong on the side in imitation. A male disciple of Xixia Valley tied a red ribbon around his head and held a gong hammer with a fluttering red ribbon in his hand. The Valley Master had just sat down at the head seat in the center and exchanged pleasantries with the peak masters and sect masters beside him with a smile on his face. Just as he was about to announce the rules and call out the numbers, he heard the gong ring with a clang. Everyone, The freaking Valley Master should be feeling very depressed right now. He hadn't even started calling out the numbers, yet that idiot disciple had already started ringing the gong. Xixia Valley's Valley Master turned his head to glare at that idiot disciple from afar. That disciple stood there with an innocent expression and smiled foolishly at him while holding the gong hammer. "I'll first announce the rules. We'll proceed according to the order of the lots. As long as one side concedes defeat, the competition will end. If you can still fight without admitting defeat, then continue fighting. We're all members of the 3 sects and 5 factions, so it's best if we don't overdo it." Xixia Valley's Valley Master laughed. "Alright, now, let's invite number 1 onto the stage. The competition begins." Everyone looked towards that young disciple holding the gong hammer. That idiot didn't hit the gong when it was supposed to and kept staring at the Valley Master as if waiting for his order. The Valley Master waited for a long time but didn't hear the gong ring. He turned his head to glare at that disciple and roared angrily, "Why don't you hit it?" Pfft! Everyone roared with laughter. With a clang from the gong, the 2 disciples number 1 flew onto the stage with vigorous postures and started exchanging blows without another word. When mystic cultivators battled, the strength of mystic energy was to a large extent. At this time, mystic cultivators had yet to realize the importance of mystic consciousness, so they could only see mystic energy flying back and forth and smashing directly at the other party. Albert took a cursory glance at the mystic skills used by these 2 mystic cultivators and could roughly determine that they were mid-level mystic skills. Most of the mystic skills that were circulating in the market were elementary mystic skills. For people like them who had joined a sect, being able to cultivate intermediate mystic skills was already considered pretty good. Only Master's personal disciples, those kind of disciples with decent talent, would be able to practice the sect's high-level profound skills, and even be able to go to the treasure pavilion to browse the higher-level ones. In a battle of profound skills, when a high-grade profound skill went up against a mid-grade profound skill, needless to say, the high-grade profound skill would definitely have the upper hand. However, the 2 people in front of him were displaying mid-grade profound skills, so it would depend on their comprehension of the profound skills. After a smart person finished reading the profound skill, not only would he be able to completely comprehend it, he would even be able to comprehend some more profound skills based on this foundation. However, it was clear that these 2 people weren't particularly intelligent, so their mystic skills were displayed in accordance with the norm. One trained his hands, while the other cultivated a mystic skill that trained his head. Therefore, when the other party clawed at him, that person always liked to use his head to block it. This made our dear Xiao Mu laugh in her heart, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up. Number 2. Holy Water Sect's disciple Chen Hanzi vs. Ghost Faction's disciple Peng Zhang. The Valley Master picked up the number plate beside him and announced. Chapter 4:16. The Xixia Valley disciple forcefully struck the gong. Clang! After the gong sounded, Chenhanzi and the ghost faction disciple, Peng Zhang, flew onto the stage and cupped their fists in greeting. A venomous glint flashed through the ghost faction disciple's eyes, and his gaze subconsciously landed on his junior sister. Choan's senior brother will definitely avenge you today, junior sister. Everyone from the Holy Water sect deserves to die. If it weren't for you guys, how could his junior sister, Choan, be such a strong-willed girl, submit herself to that ugly and sickly old man? Peng Zhang pulled out an item as thin as an iron wire. This was his level 7 mystic weapon, Mystic Spider Silk. It was incomparably sharp and also extremely good at concealment. Usually, only when the Mystic Spider Silk was right in front of the enemy's eyes would they be startled to realize that it had slit their throats. Peng Zhang took out his mystic weapon right off the bat. He had made up his mind to make Chenhanzi bleed on the spot within 3 moves. Chenhanzi sneered and suddenly summoned her exquisite awl from her conscious with a shake of her hand. The exquisite awl was triangular, so the sharpness of its tip was definitely stronger than the Mystic Spider Silk. Moreover, this awl also had a wondrous use, which was that the awl head could suddenly lengthen. Only when the enemy died would they realize this point. This level 9 mystic weapon was a treasure she had dug out from Maple Pavilion. It was quite handy, and she normally wouldn't take it out to use unless it was an important situation. But now, since the other party had also taken out a mystic weapon, could it be that she had to passively take a beating? Humph! None of the Holy Water sect's members were afraid of trouble. Peng Zhang channeled mystic energy into his hands and covered the Mystic Spider Silk. He took a step forward and directly swiped it at Chenhanzi's neck. When this move was used, Lu Yun's eyes turned completely gloomy. This ghost faction disciple clearly wanted to take her disciple's life from the start. Doya nervously clenched her hands. Although she didn't make a sound, her large, watery eyes clearly revealed her anxiety. Chenhanzi fell backward on her back and suddenly threw out the exquisite awl in her hand. Upon closer inspection, the awl's tip collided with the Mystic Spider Silk, and it actually created a tiny spark. Chenhanzi's body turned upside down and quickly kicked out twice. Borrowing the force of the kick, she flipped over and landed steadily on the ground with a backflip. The exquisite awl once again returned to her hand. An array of profound energy light burst out from the sharp awl, sweeping out an arc-shaped energy ripple as it charged straight at Peng Zhang. Peng Zhang repeatedly took a few steps back, and he was barely able to stand firm when he felt a sweetness in his throat, causing him to fiercely swallow down a strand of surging blood. In the depths of his eyes, which were covered by the gray cloth, there was a hint of killing intent. "Come out, thousand-faced venomous spider." A trace of viciousness flashed across Peng Zhang's eyes. "Holy Water sect disciple, you forced me. If it weren't for the fact that you were so insensible and refused to be executed obediently, why would I summon the thousand-faced venomous spider? This time, you're the one who brought this upon yourself, and you're going to die a miserable death. Don't blame others." Peng Zhang grinned and pointed at Chenhanzi. "Poison spider, this is your lunch. Go!" Hiss. The thousand-faced venomous spider waved its 8 long legs and crawled towards Chenhanzi at an extremely fast speed. Chenhanzi's expression froze, and she hastily released her level 9 mystic beast, the Silver Wolf. When the Silver Wolf charged towards the thousand-faced venomous spider, Chenhanzi also swiftly dashed towards Peng Zhang. Substantial killing intent had already condensed in her eyes. Peng Zhang sneered and flung out his Mystic Spider Silk. The instant he attracted Chenhanzi's attention, he swiftly took out something from his sleeve and lightly pinched it. Chapter 4:17. Arbor, who was sitting in his seat, abruptly stood up and stared at Peng Zhang with his sharp, cold eyes. "Hanzi, quickly admit defeat. Come down." Lu Yun also stood up and looked at her disciple with eyes full of anxiety. However, in the blink of an eye, the 8-legged venomous spider suddenly spat out a mouthful of venom with a hiss, and its sharp little venomous fangs abruptly bit at the Silver Wolf's paw. The Silver Wolf was very intelligent and naturally knew that this thousand-faced venomous spider's teeth were very formidable. However, just as it wanted to escape, it discovered that its paw was hooked by something. When it looked down, it discovered that it was a ball of spider web that had unwittingly entangled its paw. The thousand-faced venomous spider bit down on the silver wolf's white fur. The silver wolf immediately fell to the ground and rolled around in pain. On the other side, Chimpanzee discovered that an exotic fragrance had suddenly burrowed into her nose. Just as she cursed inwardly, she suddenly heard the silver wolf's wretched howl. She panicked, and when she was distracted again, Peng Zhang's mystic spider web was already slicing towards her neck. "Punk, you dare!" Lu Yun shouted, her eyes glaring so red that they were about to burst. When Xixia Valley's Valley Master saw that something was amiss, he immediately jumped up and shouted to stop, "Ghost Faction Disciple. You've won. Immediately release the Holy Water Sect's miss and quickly leave the stage. Split up. Split up." However, Xixia Valley's Valley Master's shout was useless. He couldn't stop Peng Zhang's deranged actions. Chimpanzee tilted her body at the moment of extreme danger, and her neck arched backwards to avoid that mystic spider web. Unfortunately, her head was dizzy and swollen, and her mobility was greatly affected. Her limbs felt like they were being restrained by something, so they were very slow and exhausted from head to toe. Although she managed to avoid Peng Zhang's fatal strike towards her neck after her movements slowed down, she couldn't avoid her shoulder anymore. However, that mystic spider web pierced into her shoulder. At this time, Chimpanzee already couldn't feel the pain in her shoulder. She only felt that her body was very, very heavy, and her head was so heavy that she couldn't control it. Her body suddenly leaned back and fell heavily onto the stage with a bang. Senior Sister Chen. Junior Sister Hanzi. The senior and junior sisters of the Holy Water Sect all stood up and shouted angrily. Xixia Valley's Valley Master decisively flew onto the stage and grabbed Peng Zhang's moving wrist. He coldly glanced at him before saying, "Ghost Faction Disciple Peng Zhang wins." Humph. Peng Zhang was unwilling to accept this. He forcefully shook off the Valley Master's hand and jumped down from the arena. When he passed by Choan, Peng Zhang's footsteps paused, and he whispered to Choan, "Junior sister, how did I do?" Choan revealed a pair of stern eyes from under the gray cloth scarf. She nodded with a smile and said, "Senior brother, you did well this time." On the other side, several senior sisters from the Holy Water Sect had already run up the stage and carried Chimpanzee and the Silver Wolf down. Black liquid flowed out of their wounds, especially the Silver Wolf, which had been severely injured by the thousand-faced venomous spider. Its fur was constantly festering and falling to the ground in handfuls. Both of them were on the verge of death. Ghost Faction, you're so despicable. You actually use this kind of despicable poison. Doya furiously stood up and pointed in the direction of the Ghost Faction as she cursed. Don't say despicable, little sister from the Holy Water Sect. This is a competition. As long as you can defeat your opponent, it doesn't matter if you use poison or medicine. As long as you use the right method and defeat your opponent, you'll win. Chapter 418. Isn't my senior brother's words reasonable? A Ghost Faction disciple added with a sinister smile. Senior Sister Chen. Ming Xia supported Chimpanzee's body and anxiously looked up at Lu Yun and the others. Master, what do we do now? Everyone, take a look and see if you have any antidote pills on you. Antidote pills are useless. The Silver Wolf was poisoned by the thousand-faced venomous spider, so a simple antidote pill can't cure this kind of poison. As for Hanzi, from the looks of it, that Ghost Faction disciple should have given her an extremely vicious medicine that can prevent her from gathering mystic energy. How is it? How is it? I have several antidote pills here. Do you want to try swallowing them first? Daybreak Sect Master's daughter, Liang Qingqing, quickly walked up and crouched next to Chimpanzee as she asked with concern. Master said the antidote pills are useless. Ming Xia was about to cry from anxiety. Everyone move aside. Don't crowd around. A cold voice interrupted, instantly causing everyone who was at a loss for words to have a flash of inspiration. That's right. Didn't little junior sister once treat City Lord Wu's daughter in 5 Moon City? That's right, that's right. Back then, wasn't his daughter poisoned by that something heartbreak grass? Little junior sister cured the poison in a few strokes. Presumably, the poison in senior sister Chen's body this time. Xiao Mu had already impatiently shooed everyone away before they could start a lively discussion. Everyone else very sensibly moved aside for her, but they basically still surrounded Chen Hanzi. After Duan Yu, Situ Yi, Wei Nanfeng, and Bailey Shi squeezed into the crowd, they saw Mo Lian standing leisurely on the side with an empty space around her. Chen Hanzi was lying there, and Darling Qiao was squatting next to her. She first felt her pulse before turning over the dying silver wolf. She took out a small wooden box and took out a pill, stuffing it into the silver wolf's mouth. Afterwards, she focused on performing acupuncture on Chen Hanzi. As soon as she started, that inexplicably familiar feeling of performing acupuncture a million times welled up in her mind once again. That kind of medicinal powder which Chen Hanzi had inhaled was scattered all over her body, turning into small grains of powder, blocking the circulation of the profound energy in Chen Hanzi's body. Arbor's hand that was holding the needle was slightly stunned. Only then did he realize that he had unknowingly sent his profound sense into his eyes and could actually see the flow of profound energy in Chen Hanzi's body. This method of controlling the flow of mystic sense into one's eyes was one of the techniques recorded in the second layer of the Spirit Division record. She had been staying on the first level all this time, painstakingly cultivating how to use her own profound sense to control her avatar. She had only glanced at the second layer of the Spirit chapter and hadn't really studied it. However, she hadn't expected that she would be able to master it in a moment of haste. Our dear Xiao Mu was a little excited in her heart. She hurriedly mobilized all the mystic energy in her branch meridians and gathered it all into mystic sense. Then, she guided it into her eyes and observed with rapt attention. More than half of the profound energy in one of Chen Hanzi's main profound veins was present. The reason why her profound energy had not filled her entire profound veins was because Chen Hanzi had exhausted quite a bit of her profound energy when she fought with Ghost Gate's Peng Zhang earlier and had yet to recover. This was really strange. It really allowed her to clearly see the condition of senior sister Chen's body. This would be beneficial for her treatment. Arbor was stunned for a moment before regaining his senses and removing the small grains of powder from Chen Hanzi's body. If she could always observe other people's profound veins in the future, then wouldn't it be equivalent to having an additional cheating device in a battle? If she opened her profound eyes in the middle of a battle, wouldn't she be able to clearly see how much profound energy was left in her opponent's body? Chapter 419. However, in less than 2 minutes, her mystic conscious quietly dissipated. Not only that, her little head also felt a slight prickling sensation. Presumably, it was because she had overused her mystic conscious. Arbor didn't dare to recklessly use her mystic conscious again. Thankfully, she was fast, and in that short amount of time, the small dust in Chen Hanzi's body was more or less cleaned up. Chen Hanzi didn't inhale much to begin with, and in addition to her quick treatment, Chen Hanzi's face turned from ghastly pale to slightly rosy pink in no time. When everyone saw that Chen Hanzi's complexion had improved, they couldn't help but heave a long sigh of relief. Lu Yun's expression also looked better, and she asked softly, "Jojo, how's Hanzi's condition?" "It's nothing serious." Arbor stuffed a detoxification pill into Chen Hanzi's mouth before standing up and saying, "Carry senior sister Hanzi over there to rest. She can't use mystic energy for 2 days, so she needs to properly nurse her body." "Okay, little junior sister." "Jojo, what's wrong?" Mo Lian suddenly grabbed her little hand and worriedly reached out to touch her slightly pale little face. "Is it very strenuous to perform acupuncture? I can help you." "I'm fine." Arbor hastily interrupted him and squeezed his hand hard, indicating for him to shut up. She knew what he wanted to say. He wanted to use medicine to help treat senior sister Chen. Did he think that she didn't know that there were side effects when superhumans used medicine? If the medicine was overused, it could even lead to a severe coma or something. How scary was that? It didn't take much effort for her to treat senior sister Chen and the silver wolf. Her complexion was only pale because she wanted to take a look at Senior Sister Chen's condition out of curiosity, which led to her overuse of her mystic conscious. She could recover to her original state with a little rest. It was best not to expose the Crown Prince's identity as an apothecary in front of others if possible to avoid trouble. Mo Lian's eyes curved slightly, and she chuckled softly and nodded. Okay, I'll listen to you. What were these two talking about again? They couldn't understand. Everyone expressed their puzzlement with stifled hearts. Aya, little junior sister actually knows how to perform acupuncture. His medical skills seem to be pretty good. The person who spoke was Mu Liangda. It was unknown when he had approached the group, but at this moment, he was looking at Arbor with great interest, and a burst of laughter came from his mouth. Don't you know that little junior sister wants to scold you the moment she catches you? Go further away. Everyone looked at him in disdain, but Mu Liangda was thick-skinned and didn't care at all. He continued to stand beside everyone and look at Arbor with a smile. Arbor didn't have time to care about her. She was trying to save Senior Sister Chen's silver wolf. The silver wolf's injuries were even more severe than Senior Sister Chen's. Its wounds had completely festered. The thousand-faced venomous spider's venom was very strong and corrosive. Some of the flesh around the wound was even necrotic. Arbor was using a small dagger to cut off the necrotic parts of the silver wolf. He quickly cleaned the wound, took out a pack of powder, sprinkled it on the cloth, and then firmly covered the silver wolf's wound. Soon, the silver wolf's wound from the venomous spider's stab stopped festering, and the bleeding also stopped immediately. At this time, Chenhanzi had already faintly regained consciousness and was calling out softly, "Silver wolf, silver wolf." The senior sisters from the Holy Water sect immediately rushed to her side and bent down to whisper to her, "Don't worry, junior sister Chen. The silver wolf is fine. Little junior sister saved it." Only then did Chenhanzi let out a sigh of relief. Her vision darkened, and she quickly fainted again. Chapter 420. Peng Zhang sat in the Ghost Faction's seating area and watched the Holy Water sect's people busily treating the silver wolf from afar. A disdainful and callous smile spread across his face. A waste of effort. If the mystic abandoning powder he gave Chenhanzi could still be cured. The silver wolf's bite from the thousand-faced venomous spider simply couldn't be treated. Those foolish women from the Holy Water sect still wanted to vainly save the silver wolf's life. He was very familiar with the thousand-faced venomous spider's poison. His thousand-faced venomous spider had just advanced to level 10 not long ago, so it was simply a piece of cake for it to bite a level 9 mystic beast to death. With the silver wolf dead, Chenhanzi, a mystic cultivator who had lost her mystic beast, naturally had her strength greatly reduced. Putting aside the fact that she couldn't contract with other mystic beasts in the future, at least her mental state definitely wouldn't be able to overcome this hurdle, and her life would come to an end. Ha ha ha. Peng Zhang straightened his back and sent a look to junior sister Cho, and beside him, "Watch carefully, junior sister. Senior brother will vent your anger for you, starting with this female disciple." Cho-un smiled without batting an eyelid. However, her face that was buried under the gray headscarf soon scrunched up. From her position, she just happened to be able to see the youth Mo Lian standing on the side, attentively watching a little girl who was squatting on the ground performing treatment. The youth's gaze didn't shift away from the little girl from beginning to end. This made her heart feel like it was being gnawed by thousands of ants. Not only was it riddled with holes, but it was also abnormally painful. "You will regret it." Cho-un tugged at the corner of her mouth, revealing a cruel sneer. Peng Zhang didn't understand the situation, so he lifted his robe and crossed his legs, calmly waiting for the Holy Water sect's people to start wailing. However, after a long while, after 2 consecutive matches, there wasn't any movement from the Holy Water sect's side. Instead, they all returned to their seats in their respective positions. Peng Zhang was slightly taken aback, and he looked in the direction of the Holy Water sect with a frown. He turned his head and said to a junior brother beside him, "Go over and inquire about what's going on with the Holy Water sect." The junior disciple from the Ghost faction didn't dare to go over. He felt that he might be asking for a beating if he went over. Those girls from the Holy Water sect didn't look like they were to be trifled with. He hesitated for a moment, yet he had no choice in the end. Under the threatening gaze of senior brother Pengzhang, he could only stand up angrily and walk over dejectedly. Their ghost sect was like this. The higher-ups bullied the lower-ups, and the elders bullied the ordinary disciples. This was a common thing. Everyone relied on their own abilities to fight for the upper echelons. Those at the bottom basically had no way out. Especially junior brothers like them who had just entered the sect. In the eyes of those senior brothers who had grown up, they were just servants who could be ordered around. They had no status in the sect at all. The young disciple's heart trembled as he braced himself and walked up to a senior sister from the Holy Water sect. He used a voice that was only loud enough for him to hear and timidly asked, "May I ask this senior sister, how is the senior sister that you guys carried down just now? Who are you calling senior sister?" That female disciple suddenly stood up and raised her hand to slap this ghost faction disciple heavily on the face. "Scram! You bunch of little bastards from Hellgate, don't come and argue with us. Who knows you?" The junior disciple from Ghost Faction was about to cry. He covered one side of his face and turned to look at senior brother Pengzhang, who was sitting in his own seat. He saw that half of his face was gloomy, and his expression was a bit frightening. "As senior sister, I also didn't want to come over." The junior disciple covered his face and retreated a step. Chapter 421. He was so timid that he practically didn't dare to look at the expressions of the surrounding Holy Water sect disciples. These Holy Water sect women all had extremely unsightly expressions, as if they would immediately pounce on him and tear him apart. He just knew that this was an arduous task. Senior brother Pengzhang had sent him here purely to find trouble. "Humph, go back and tell him that if he wants to know about our senior sister Chen's situation, then tell him to come over himself. But let's see if he dares or not." That senior sister raised her eyebrows and looked at the Ghost Faction disciple provocatively. Another Holy Water sect disciple beside her started laughing. This kind of cowardly tortoise only knows how to use some despicable methods on the stage. He doesn't even dare to run over to our territory to behave atrociously, so don't even think about it. The Ghost Faction disciple cast a pleading look at Pengzhang, but the latter glared at him in dissatisfaction with a taut face. The Ghost Faction disciple dejectedly returned to his seat and secretly said to Pengzhang, "Senior brother, the Holy Water sect wants you to personally go over and ask. Are they worthy?" Pengzhang sneered and rubbed his thumbs. "In order to hide our abilities before the competition, we instead caused junior sister to suffer grievances. Now, we don't need to anymore. These Holy Water sect girls will soon know that our Ghost Faction isn't so easy to provoke." Pengzhang gazed darkly at Xiao Mu. Xiao Mu keenly sensed his gaze and turned her head to look at him. Her pair of eyes that were as tranquil as an ancient well contained a 10,000-year-old chill, causing Pengzhang to inexplicably shudder. Chen Hanzi's injury was simply a fuse. Following that, whenever the Holy Water sect disciples encountered members of the Ghost Faction, they would be extremely ruthless in their attacks. Both sides had injuries of varying severity. Overall, it was still the Holy Water sect that had the upper hand. As long as the Holy Water sect disciples were wary of the Ghost Faction's poisoning methods and seized the initiative, they would absolutely suppress the Ghost Faction with their orthodox cultivation techniques. After several rounds, the Ghost Faction disciples were all suppressed by the Holy Water sect girls and carried off the stage with heavy injuries. Ghost Surt's expression was very unsightly. At this time, Ning Bihuan defeated a Ghost Faction disciple with her silver spear and even heavily injured him. The Ghost Faction's elder Gue Buddha finally couldn't help but curse, "Eldest Miss Ning, you're too heavy-handed." It was fine if the Holy Water sect's people had accumulated grievances with the Ghost Faction, but even the Omni Faction's Ning Bihuan, one of the 5 factions, treated the Ghost Faction's people like this. Elder Ghost didn't know what to say. His old face was solemn and taut. When he looked at Ning Bihuan, there seemed to be a raging fire burning in his eyes. However, Ning Bihuan didn't care. She raised her hand to stop Elder Ghost's words. Since we agreed on a competition, then everyone should bring out their true abilities to fight. Everyone should rely on their own abilities. If you're afraid, you can just go on stage and admit defeat. I don't care. Once he finished speaking, he shrugged in an infuriating manner, as if he looked down on Elder Ghost. Ghost Surf was angered half to death by this clumsy Ning Bihuan. He glared angrily at Peng Zhang and the others. Why haven't you carried your junior brother down yet? How shameful. He didn't pick a good day. After these few matches, more than half of their Hellgate disciples were seriously injured. How unlucky was this? Right now, he was a bit vexed about Peng Zhang's previous willfulness. If it weren't for him starting this conflict, how could things have developed to such an unmanageable state? Chapter 422. In the afternoon, the scorching sun had already risen to its highest point, and the entire area around the stage was filled with a fiery atmosphere. This match was between a Coitus faction female disciple and a Daybreak sect male disciple. The Coitus faction female disciple threw herself into the male disciple's arms as soon as she came up, startling him into retreating repeatedly. That female disciple was still muttering, "Little big brother, don't hurt me," when the Daybreak sect disciple suddenly rushed in front of her and smashed her to the ground with a slap. The entire area was silent for a moment before bursting into cheers. Arbor speechlessly looked above the stage. The Daybreak sect disciple seemed to have been provoked, and his entire body was like a little calf as he exerted a burst of brute force. He grabbed the Coitus faction female disciple's hair with one hand and even slapped her with his other hand. In the beginning, the Coitus sect disciple was still crying out softly, "Iayu, oh, oh." Then, he was beaten until his true colors were revealed. Flustered and exasperated, he roared, "You little bastard, stop. This old lady's hair. This old lady's face. You freaking stop right there. Everyone, come out." The Coitus faction female disciple summoned her mystic beast. She was about to go mad from anger. Her makeup, her image, her beautiful clothes, and her headdress. They were all completely ruined by this barbarian in front of her. So angry, so angry, so angry. The Coitus faction female disciple's first sentence after summoning her mystic beast was to directly order her mystic beast to eat the bull-like youth in front of her. The Daybreak sect disciple also summoned his mystic beast. Everyone couldn't help but be amused when they saw this. It really was a bull-like creature. This bull-like creature was very large, and when it stood on the stage, the two people were directly squeezed to the edge of the stage. The fat rabbit summoned by the Coitus faction disciple was simply comical and laughable in front of the bull-like creature. Therefore, everyone soon saw that the Coitus faction female disciple and her fat rabbit were completely crushed by the Daybreak sect disciple and the mystic beast bull-like creature. The fat rabbit was being trampled under the bull-like creature's hooves, and it truly looked somewhat pitiful. The Coitus faction female disciple was no longer as coquettish and flirtatious as when she first went up on stage. At this time, she was beaten into a sorry state. Her face was ashen, and her eyes were spitting fire as she angrily said, "Wait. I admit defeat." The one-sided beating finally came to an end. The female disciple of Coitus sect cried miserably, and was fiercely glared at by Granny Witch. "Useless thing, you still have the face to cry." "Master." Tears streamed down the woman's face. She felt wronged. How could she have known that the barbarian bull would completely ignore her charm technique? Did he think that she liked to throw herself at him? That was one of the basic cultivation techniques of the Coitus faction. Unfortunately, before she could fully display her charm technique, she was viciously beaten by that little brat barbarian bull. It was too infuriating. "Go back and train hard." Granny Witch's cold words caused this Coitus sect disciple to involuntarily tremble all over. Shixia Valley's Valley Master couldn't help but sigh in relief when he saw that this beating had finally ended. He continued to call out numbers with a smile on his face. Number 82, Holy Water Sect Disciple Arbor accepts the challenge. Xixia Valley's Valley Master was abruptly startled. Under everyone's puzzled gazes, he continued to recite, Ghost Faction Disciple Cho, and the audience was in an uproar. Everyone was too familiar with number 82. Wasn't this the number that the Holy Water Sect's young lady changed to? Shouldn't her opponent be that Daybreak Sect disciple Mu Liangda? Why did she change again? Chapter 423. Xixia Valley's Valley Master was stupefied halfway through his recitation. That day, he had personally witnessed the little girl brazenly switching numbers with someone else in order to directly challenge a Daybreak Sect disciple named Mu Liangda on the stage. But what was happening now? Duan Yu coldly glared at Mu Liangda. However, Mu Liangda merely pretended not to know why everyone was making a racket and maintained a chuckle. Mu Liangda, you weren't number 82 from the start, right? Duan Yu coldly questioned. Everyone from Daybreak's sect looked at Mu Liangda himself in bewilderment. The sect master's daughter, Liang Qingqing, also frowned. Mu Liangda, is what senior brother Duan Yu said true? The number you reported at the start was that of Cho and from the Ghost Faction? Junior sister Qingqing, I'm also not sure about this matter. Mu Liangda continued to smile and feign ignorance. He wouldn't honestly admit that Choan had already come to him to talk about this before the small banquet. The two of them discussed and both felt that since the little girl mentioned it before, she would definitely tamper with the number drawing and change it to Mu Liangda's opponent no matter what. Choan wanted to give that little bitch a surprise, so she secretly instructed Mu Liangda that she would give him a number hint during the drawing. If the little girl really came to ask him, he would report Choan's number to the little girl. Mu Liangda naturally approved with both hands raised. Since he was bound to have a battle with that little girl, he was quite happy for someone to challenge the little girl before him so that he could figure out her ins and outs. After all, he was still a bit flustered by the meaningful gazes that several people around him were giving him. If the little girl didn't have something outstanding about her, why were they all staring at him with those strange gazes? Choan truly hit it off with Mu Liangda when she came to find him and conspired against the little girl. Both of them obtained their own desires and achieved their goals. Xiao Mu was originally exceptionally intelligent, so she naturally understood what Duan Yu could figure out after thinking about it for a bit. Pretty good. Jackals of the same lair even learned to scheme against the little girl. She would let them know that in the face of strength, all schemes and tricks were nothing. Arbor stood up from his seat, and Imo Lien coldly looked at the Daybreak Sect disciple, Mu Liangda, who was secretly pleased with himself. There was still a refined and courteous smile on Mu Liangda's lips, but when his gaze met the Crown Prince's extremely cold and oppressive gaze, he couldn't help but quickly avert his gaze as his body inexplicably trembled slightly. Mu Liangda. When the little girl walked to the front of the stage, she suddenly turned around, and her eyes shot toward Daybreak Sect's seating area like lightning. She coldly said, since you want to see my strength first, then I'll let you see it. I hope you have the courage to accept my challenge in the next match. Don't be a coward. Ugly. Everyone was speechless. Mu Liangda's expression immediately turned extremely ugly, as though it had been painted green. Why was he a coward? Even his own sect's disciples were looking at him with disdain. What was going on? Duan Yu sneered, Mu Liangda, you're a Daybreak Sect disciple. You should be very clear about the situation of the 3 sects and 5 factions. It won't do you any good to be too close to people from the Ghost Faction. You understand? When Mu Liangda saw the gazes his senior and junior brothers and sisters cast over, he felt so stifled that he almost couldn't take it anymore. He and Choan were merely taking what they each needed, so why did it sound like he had betrayed the sect and colluded with the Ghost Faction in Duan Yu's mouth? Chapter 424. Everyone, please don't misunderstand. Mu Liangda hastily said, Senior brother Duan Yu, I really didn't get close to the Ghost Faction. Duan Yu waved his hand, not wanting to speak with him anymore. Liang Qingqing also glanced at him disappointedly. Senior brother Mu, it's wrong of you to associate yourself with the Ghost Faction. Mulyangda opened his mouth, but he was suppressing a surge of anger in his heart. He sat there sullenly as his gaze drifted towards the stage. He saw the little girl steadily walking up the stairs onto the stage. A snow leopard with white fur landed at her feet with a whoosh. Choan leaped onto the stage with a very lithe posture. It was impossible to tell that she had her hand chopped off a few days ago and was on the brink of death. Choan's gaze landed smugly on Arbor's face. What, very surprised, right? Her voice was very hoarse, as if it had been whipped by countless vines. It was terrifyingly coarse. I'm not surprised. I just didn't expect that someone would be so stupid as to rush to court death, Arbor said dryly as he shook his head, bitch. Choan shouted roughly, her eyes glaring with a venomous glint. Have you heard of a saying? A scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes. Choan's right hand poked out from her sleeve, and everyone involuntarily sucked in a cold breath when they saw it. This person's right arm didn't look like a human hand at all. It was more like a piece of withered wood, and her 5 fingers and fingernails were twisted like long withered vines. Demonic cultivator. Someone suddenly shouted. Little junior sister, be careful. This person fused with the power of a demonic plant. Ha 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 ha. Choan looked up to the sky and laughed smugly. She flipped open her gray headscarf, revealing a face so fair that it was somewhat strange. Is my face beautiful? She used that hand that was twisted like a withered vine to gently caress her fair and smooth face. Is it beautiful? How should he put it? That face was quite beautiful when taken apart, but when put together, it made people feel very awkward. It was like a fake face, with a stroke here and a piece there. When put together, there was no sense of harmony at all. Arbor shook his head. Ugly. Choan's face stiffened, and she said angrily, what do you know? My previous face was 10,000 times more beautiful than this. It's all because of you, because of you. She approached Arbor step by step, pointed at one of her eyes, and asked with a coarse smile, can you tell that this is a fake eye? Arbor nodded. Don't be so angry. Your eyeballs might fall out. Everyone was speechless. Why was the style so strange? Ah! Choan shouted. She was simply about to go mad with anger. She originally wanted to scare the little slut, but who knew that the stoic face was expressionless from beginning to end? Shouldn't a normal girl at least be a little shocked when they saw her fake eyes? Do you know who I am? Arbor shook his head. I don't know you. You don't know me, haha. You don't know me, ha 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 ha. Choan felt that her words were extremely sarcastic. Her enemy didn't know her at all, but she was in so much pain because of this enemy in front of her day and night. How laughable was this? Choan's one eye was tearing up from laughing. Do you still remember Nyen Kue who went to Shizhou City to kill you? I am his master. The master of that pitiful worm who self-destructed after you crushed his soul. Chapter 425. She didn't reveal a shocked expression like the others, nor did she point at Choan and shout, so it's you. The little fellow only tilted her head in thought for a moment before nodding and uttering an oh. Everyone, dot. Why did they feel like they would be angered to death if they conversed with the little girl? You finally revealed your background with surging passion and deep hatred, right? It was supposed to be very exciting and should have been a gasp of surprise. However, the other party merely threw an oh at you indifferently, like a basin of cold water drenching you from head to toe. All of your excited emotions abruptly disappeared. Choan trembled in anger. You don't remember Nyen Kue? I feel that whether I remember one of your subordinates or not doesn't have much to do with our current battle. Arbor patted the snow leopard's head indifferently. After saying so much, can we get to the point? She felt that these people were very boring. Everyone liked to talk a lot of nonsense when they came up. With so much time to talk, the battle could have already ended. Choan looked at Arbor gloomily. You're not a level 10 mystic cultivator yet. don't you think it's too fake to borrow someone else's mystic beast to fight? Can it be as fake as your face? You bitch! These words simply pierced her girlish heart full of holes, making her feel like she was in hell, unable to see the light again. Arbor knitted his brows and pointed at Choan. Go tear her mouth. It's so dirty. The snow leopard abruptly charged forward. Choan stretched out her 5 claws, and her withered vine-like arm swept toward the snow leopard's head with a whoosh. She shouted sternly, "You're breaking the rules too much. This snow leopard isn't yours at all. You can't let it participate in the battle. If it's not mine, then is it yours? Why don't you make it listen to you?" Arbor coldly followed up. "Ah! Come out!" Choan's eyes shot out a cold and vicious glint. With a furious shout, a very long centipede suddenly burrowed out from her side. The most disgusting thing was that there was actually an ugly human face on the centipede's head. As it crawled, that face kept faintly facing you, and several hundred pairs of slender legs densely stretched out. Xiao Mu jumped back a step. Although her small face was expressionless, her entire body was bristling. Fortunately, the snow leopard took a step forward and stood in front of her, slapping the human-faced centipede. The little fellow stomped on the ground and charged towards Choan. With the ferrule in his hand, the profound energy in his entire body surged. He was already in a state of violent rage. So, a line of fire shot out from the ferrule, directly breaking through the solid stone tiles of the arena, scraping out a shallow gully, and surging towards Choan's feet. Choan did not panic. She swung out her vine-like arm and smashed it into the incoming line of fire. A slender figure had already arrived in front of Choan. Without saying a word, a ferrule struck towards Choan's abdomen. Choan's pupils constricted. She hurriedly released her vines and wrapped them around her abdomen. Bang! Unexpectedly, the little guy changed his move very quickly and punched Choan's forehead. This punch carried a strong gust of wind as it smashed into her forehead, causing Choan to retreat several steps. Mu Liangda was watching from below, and his eyes had already revealed a grave expression. As expected, this little girl was very formidable. Her combat strength seemed to be incomparable to a level 8 mystic cultivator's cultivation. Compared to level 8 mystic cultivators of the same level, she was much stronger in terms of speed and explosive power. 10:00 clock ends, see you tomorrow. Chapter 426. Crack, the sound of her forehead cracking entered Choan's ears, causing her hair to stand on end. Bitch, bitch! Ah, Choan trembled as she reached out to touch her forehead. She felt as if something had ruptured under her skin. Back then, she was implicated by Nian Kuei's self-detonation. Although she used a level 4 defensive mystic weapon at the critical moment and barely managed to save her life, she lost one eye. All the skin on her body shattered and even festered due to the explosion. Her father rushed her to the ghost sect and begged ghost physician Luigi to treat her. She was mended piece by Luigi. Her face was unnatural and uncoordinated compared to other people's normal faces. She knew better than anyone else. More than anyone else, she wanted to regain her face that originally belonged to her. But was it possible? Impossible. Because of this woman in front of her, she had already lost her face forever. But now, this woman was so cruel that she even wanted to destroy her fake face. Choan was that commandery princess Hui and who was doted on by everyone back then. At this moment, she was staring at the little girl standing in front of her with a sinister eye. If she hadn't coincidentally bumped into her in Shixia Valley this time, she still wouldn't have known who the commoner village girl from Shizhou City that the crown prince had been protecting so well was. After her accident back then, her father felt that something was amiss. Nian Kuei couldn't have self-detonated for no reason, so perhaps someone was scheming against her behind the scenes. Her father quickly sent people out of the capital to Shizhou City to investigate the whole story. However, not long after, her father secretly came to tell her that the people he sent out were all intercepted and killed by His Highness the Crown Prince. In the future, they probably couldn't send people to Shizhou City to investigate anything. Otherwise, they would definitely infuriate the Crown Prince and cause unnecessary trouble. His Highness the Crown Prince was warning them not to touch that person in Shizhou City again. Ha 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 ha. Commandery Princess Huiyan was laughing so hard that she nearly choked. Suddenly, a piece of dead wood shot out from under her perfectly fine chest lapel and struck Arbor's head. Arbor had been paying attention to this mentally unstable woman. When she was laughing and crying, Arbor was already on guard against her. As a result, this piece of dead wood that suddenly drilled out from under her chest didn't hurt Arbor at all. Instead, it was broken by her with a backhand slap of her ferrule. I didn't expect that my commandery Princess Huiyan of the vassal king of an Nan's estate would have such a day. Huiyan turned her head and looked deeply at Mo Lian. Your Highness, do you regret it? Mo Lian's slender brows were completely furrowed. However, Duan Yu suddenly jumped up from his seat and shouted, "See! I told you that it was your love debt that had implicated our Jojo." Mo Lian turned to glare fiercely at Duan Yu, feeling extremely impatient with this commandery Princess Huiyan. Back then, if the vassal king of an Nan hadn't sensed his intentions and immediately sent Huiyan out of the capital to become a disciple of the ghost sect, how could he have let this babbling woman off? What an inexplicable woman. She should have known when she started talking to herself and making a move on his Chow Chow. Karma was a circle. What was wrong with his darling taking revenge on her? Could it be that she was the only one allowed to kill people as she pleased and others weren't allowed to retaliate? Who was she pretending to be the victim for? Chapter 427. Arbor furrowed his brows. For some reason, he felt uncomfortable in his heart when he saw that masquerade woman looking at Mo Lian with a mournful expression. You're not allowed to look at me and act pitiful. You're not allowed to act. Arbor tilted his head and suddenly shot up, sending waves of mystic energy toward Commandery Princess Huiyan below him. The current Commandery Princess Huiyan already struck fear into everyone's hearts. Strips of dead wood actually burrowed out of her body and wriggled as if they were alive. That scene was truly too beautiful, and people could not bear to look at it directly. Master, what's going on? Are demonic cultivators such terrifying existences? Doya covered her mouth with both hands, a trace of horror on her face. Lu Yun shook her head and said, no, she shouldn't be a pure demonic cultivator. This ghost faction disciple was originally a mystic cultivator. Some people in this world can't open their mystic meridians and become a mystic cultivator, so they don't hesitate to use crooked methods to merge their bodies with evil beasts and plants to pursue the realm of a demonic cultivator. This ghost faction disciple is already a level 10 mystic cultivator, so she shouldn't be pursuing a demonic cultivator, right? Lu Yun was perplexed after much thought. Yang Shirong also nodded repeatedly on the side. Morong Sun looked at Commandery Princess Huiyan on the stage. At this moment, the area below her neck was completely enveloped by intertwined dead wood. It was as if she was wrapped in a cocoon made of dead wood. Other than her head being intact, every other part of her body could no longer be called a human's. Xiao Mu looked down at the puppet inside the withered wooden cocoon from above. Suddenly, she recalled the ferrule in her hand into her conscious and replaced it with a normal bow and arrow. Ha 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 ha. The deadwood cocoon crazily wriggled its body, and its head strangely tilted toward the sky. When it looked at Arbor, a vicious glint flowed through its single eye. Several hundred dead wood shaved out of the cocoon and simultaneously whipped toward Arbor in midair. Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! Arbor pulled back his bowstring, constantly changing his position in the air, and with astonishing speed, he kept shooting arrows at the cocoon. The deadwood cocoon went berserk, and the thousands upon thousands of deadwood roots twisted and lashed at Xiao Mu. Floating flash! Arbor's figure instantly disappeared from the spot where he was wrapped in the deadwood. When he reappeared, he was already standing behind the deadwood cocoon. He was still continuously shooting arrows at the deadwood cocoon. He was continuously drawing out a large number of arrows from the purple storage talisman. Everyone had already lost count of how many arrows this little girl had shot. Only Mo Lien, Duan Yu, Bailey Shi, the three peak masters, and the sect masters saw it very clearly and calculated it very accurately. 286, 287, 288 arrows. The little girl stopped and held the bow and arrow in midair. She looked coldly at the inhuman thing that kept going crazy and whipping the arena with a withered branch. Ah! Ah! Commandery Princess Hui An had completely sunk into insanity. At this time, the little girl suddenly spoke. The human body has 409 acupuncture points. Among them, the 108 acupoints were more important. Now that you're in this ghastly state, I can't even see the acupuncture points below your neck clearly. So, just in case, I shot 288 arrows at you. That's about all the acupuncture points, right? The little girl muttered to herself. Your arrows are useless against me. Commandery Princess Hui An roared angrily. Chapter 428. You'll know very soon whether it's useful or not. Arbor coldly gazed at her. For some reason, Muliangda's eyelids twitched inexplicably when he heard the little girl's words. Arbor pulled back his bowstring and aimed at the withered tree cocoon. Explosive arrow. Whoosh! That arrowhead rapidly shot toward Commandery Princess Hui An at lightning speed. Hui An was enraged, and she abruptly swung the writhing withered tree at the arrowhead. She harshly shouted, "Whimsical bitch! Do you think that a few incomparably ordinary lousy arrows can penetrate my impenetrable body? Ha 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 ha! This is the body of a level 10 mystic cultivator and a demonic cultivator, ha ha ha!" Bang! A clear and crisp sound of an explosion rang out from beneath her body. This explosion seemed to have triggered a song of explosion, and explosions of various sizes immediately resounded in Commandery Princess Hui An's body, which was like a cocoon made out of dead wood. Bang bang, bang bang bang. Crack crack. The explosive arrows directly tore open holes in the withered tree cocoon, and streaks of strange red blood flowed out. Oh, so it can bleed. Arbor nodded in realization and retreated slightly. He stood at the edge of the stage and coolly gazed at Commandery Princess Hui An, who was continuously exploding. The surroundings were already dead silent. The scene before them was truly a bit horrifying. Commandery Princess Hui An's transformation into a withered tree cocoon was already shocking enough. But now, they were directly watching a withered tree cocoon explode inch by inch in front of them. The flesh and internal organs inside all flipped out and fell to the ground piece by piece in a sea of red and white. It was quite visually stunning. Every explosive arrow would explode after hitting the target, but Arbor controlled his previous 288 arrows so that they did not explode. It wasn't until the last arrow that triggered the universe that Commandery Princess Hui An enjoyed. At the same time, it was the refreshing feeling of having such a large number of explosive arrows explode in her body. The scene was truly too beautiful. No one dared to keep staring. After a while, they could not resist looking away and shaking their heads repeatedly. The expressions of the Ghoul sect disciples became abnormally ugly. Peng Zhang was even more heartbroken. He wanted to charge into the arena like a madman. Junior sister. Junior sister. He did not expect his junior sister to do such a crazy thing in the competition. It was all because of this little witch in front of him. It was all because of her. Senior apprentice brother Peng Zhang, senior apprentice brother Peng Zhang, you can't go. A few Ghost faction disciples held him down, and secretly raised their eyes to look at Elder Ghost, who had an ugly expression on his face. When Lu Yizhi was supported by his retainer, Qiu San, he stared coldly at the stage and shook his head in disappointment. Truly a useless thing. Even after swallowing the evil body pill, it was still useless. He couldn't even beat a 12 or 13-year-old girl. Qiu San's eyes were filled with fear. Sir, you're right. Look at that lady from the Qiao family. Her methods are so cruel and vile. She's not an easy person to deal with. Humph, Lu Yizhi's eyes turned cold. I think it's because Hui An is too weak. Such a waste of my precious evil body, Dan. What a pity. Luigi shook his head. If he had known that she was so weak, he would not have given it to her. He had found all kinds of medicinal ingredients and spent at least 2 years to refine this pill that was infused with the blood essence of the evil plant. What a pity, what a pity. Chapter 429. Sir, should I help you back? Chio-san asked quietly as he supported Luigi. Since that woman called Hui and was clearly a useless pawn, there was no need for them to continue watching. However, Luigi's eyes were still fixated on Arbor on the stage. He coughed a few times in a low voice, conjecture and confusion in his eyes. I really didn't expect that a small continent like Seikong planet in the lower star domain would have such a brilliant mystic technique. Luigi muttered to himself as he stared at the two people on the stage with a hint of hesitation in his eyes. This is nothing. In our Shantian prefecture, there are probably plenty of low-level and mid-level mystic techniques like this, Chio-san said disdainfully. Low-level and mid-level mystic technique? Luigi sneered. Chio-san, you've been by my side for so long, but your eyesight is getting worse. Chio-san was taken aback. How brilliant can this mystic technique executed with a normal bow and arrow be? Using a normal bow and arrow to destroy the amalgamation of a level 10 mystic cultivator and a demonic cultivator is the terrifying part of this mystic technique. Luigi knew better than anyone that Hui An's current body was completely wrapped in that withered tree cocoon. Other than the area above her neck, there were originally no openings. Chio-san, in the eyes of the Chow family's little miss, that amalgamation of demonic plants that we thought was flawless is actually full of openings. Luigi lamented. Otherwise, how could she have hit Hui An's vitals with every arrow? How could Hui An survive after detonating these explosive arrows? At this time, Commandery Princess Hui An had already stepped onto the path of self-destruction. She lowered her head in horror and saw that her cocoon-like body was currently exploding inch by inch. The ground was already covered in a thick layer of withered vines and broken wood. After the outer layer of cocoon peeled off, the body inside was truly riddled with holes and was extremely horrifying. Shixia Valley's Valley Master braced himself and jumped onto the stage that was in a complete mess. He first speechlessly glanced at Arbor, who was standing at the edge of the stage, before sighing. He walked to Arbor's side and turned to the people below the stage to announce, Holy Water Sect's disciple, Arbor, wins this match. He turned around and glanced at the badly mutilated thing on the ground and shook his head. He thought to himself that this female disciple of the ghost faction was probably not going to survive. After everyone heard Shixia Valley's Valley Master's announcement, they were dazed for a good few seconds. Then, as if they had regained their wits, the entire place erupted into a clamor. Mixed in were the angry roars of the ghost faction disciples and the cheers of the Holy Water Sect disciples, so it was truly very chaotic. Arbor jumped down from the arena expressionlessly and walked straight in the direction of his own sect, ignoring the glares of the Hellgate disciples along the way. No one knew that under that stoic face of hers, there were also some small fluctuations in her mood. She had learned this explosive arrow technique from the Spirit Division Records Technique chapter. To be honest, she still hadn't figured out what level of mystic technique the Spirit Division record was, but from the looks of it now it really didn't seem that simple. Ever since it revealed its true form and flew into her consciousness on its own, she felt that this lousy book wasn't as simple as it seemed. Now that she looked at it, it was even more not simple. Any random minor technique in the technique chapter could explode Hui An's supposedly powerful fusion body. Xiao Mu suddenly paused in her footsteps and turned her head slightly to the side. Chapter 430. Right in front of her, Peng Zhang was being pressed down by several ghost faction disciples. His face was brimming with fury, and his eyes were bloodshot as he glared at her. If it weren't for the ghost faction disciples holding him back, Peng Zhang would have already rushed over and probably wanted to beat her up. What a baffling person. His heart ached for his junior sister. Could it be that Arbor deserved to stand on the stage as a live target for his junior sister to slap? Victory or defeat depended on one's ability, so what was there to be unconvinced about? What he hated the most was this kind of person who pestered endlessly after losing. Arbor glanced at Peng Zhang before disdainfully withdrawing her gaze. She walked past the ghost faction members and briskly ran back to her sect. Suddenly, she heard everyone's gasps. The Holy Water sect senior sisters who were originally smiling at her from afar abruptly changed their expressions, and they cried out involuntarily, "Little junior sister, be careful." A gust of wind came from the back of Arbor's head, and an icy chill immediately hung on her stoic face. It turned out that Hui En was struggling with her broken body as she rushed down the stage. She snatched a sword from a ghost faction disciple's hand and threw it at her back with a vicious glint in her eyes. As expected, she was a sore loser. Since she dared to sneak attack her, she would die without a burial place. Just as she was about to turn around, an extremely fast, moon-white figure landed beside her with a whoosh. The figure harshly pulled her into his embrace with his left hand, and at the same time, he raised his right hand and spread open his fingers, throwing out a leaping ball of purple flames. After the flames swept past the flying sword, that pitiful sword turned into ashes before everyone's eyes and disappeared inch by inch. Hui then covered her fake face that had long deformed in fright. Because of her violent movements, one of her eyeballs really did fall out of its socket. The instant she covered her face with her hand, her entire body was already enveloped by a ball of purple flames. The little fellow blinked and laid in Imo Lien's embrace. A comforting, extremely faint, and relaxed aura tightly enveloped her. Everyone present simultaneously widened their eyes, and their expressions changed as they looked at the ghost faction female disciple who was struggling and screaming while being enveloped by the purple flames. Outside the arena, Luigi's expression also changed for the first time as he stared in horror at the youth in white who had thrown out the purple flames. His retainer, Chio-san, also sucked in a breath of cold air. "Sir, where did this youth come from? How could this be?" "Hualing." Luigi shook his head and muttered to himself, "Impossible. How could one comprehend the five spirit origins in this kind of place? Could it be?" Chio-san leaned close to Luigi and pointed upwards. "Like us, which mannerhead sent them over?" "Impossible." Luigi shook his head in absolute denial. "If someone from the 6 prefectures came, there's no way we wouldn't have heard of it." "That's true." Chio-san also felt puzzled and nodded. Then could it be that this youth really comprehended the 5 spirits' origin powers on Seikong planet? Luigi shook his head repeatedly. The fire spirit origin he comprehended is too powerful. I've never seen it even in Shantian Prefecture. Impossible, impossible, impossible. This simply didn't conform to the rules and regulations. Regardless of how conflicted Luigi and his retainer, Chio-san, were in disbelief, the raging purple flames had already enveloped Commandery Princess Hui An's entire body. The little fellow turned around and coolly looked at Commandery Princess Hui An, who was howling miserably as she was roasted by the flames.